across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk Breakfast. I'm Peter Cardwell in for Mark Dolan this Saturday and Sunday. You're very welcome to the programme. Lots to discuss, including the chaos after that emergency alert last night at 7 o'clock or thereabouts for a lot of people. Some people came through an hour and a half later on. We had the alert to most of our phones in the UK. Panic spread across the country. What was your reaction? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. Was this a good use of the government's emergency alert facility to simply say don't buy barbecues and don't use them because it's a bit hot? Similarly, we'll be talking about the Cambridge academic Jason Arday. One of his friends says he was hounded to death by the media. Do you agree with that, or do you think that perhaps these institutions, with their diversity, equity and inclusion, wanted to believe his lies and attempted to protect him from the truth? There was some very good journalism that happened. Now that journalism has been criticised, including by the High Priest of the Left, Julian Mom. We'll hear what he had to say in just a second. We'll talk about the Clacton by-election. Nigel Farage MP, again, was it the right gamble for him? Loads more to discuss over the next 4 hours between now and 10 o'clock here on Talk Breakfast. As always, I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you have to say, what your views are, positive, negative. You think we're talking nonsense, you think we've got the right idea, whatever you think, you're very welcome to contribute. The numbers, as usual, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, less than a minute please, if you would. We'll play out as many of those as we can between now and 10 o'clock. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, you can give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss in the next 4 hours between now and 10 o'clock, so stay with me here on Talk Breakfast. And I'm delighted, for the first hour at least, I will be joined by the political commentator Charlie Rowley. Lovely to see you, Charlie.
Good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Happy Saturday.
Yes, happy Saturday. And you did a brilliant job on Wednesday. I was watching you from my sick bed.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
I think you'd done the morning as well, actually. You'd been in with Jeremy, is that right?
I had, in this very hour, yes, so 6 till 7, which is the usual slot.
On a Wednesday?
On a Wednesday morning. And then I just went about my merry day, you know me, pottered, did all the mundane things that you'd expect someone at that early hour to do, who's now finished work at 7 a.m.
Yes.
And then sort of got the call. But
good. Well, you did a great job, and I was watching you from my sick bed. So thank you for it. Well, it's a bit patronising to say thank you for sitting in, but I mean, you did a great job, and I appreciate that. Just on the big news stories of the morning, let me just run you through what has been happening over the last 24 hours, and then we'll chew the cud with Charlie. And I'd love to hear from you too. As I say, 0344 499 1000. The One show on BBC One last night, just after 7 o'clock, this alarm went off. And we were here, I was here actually last night. My usual evening show is 7 till 10, as many of you will know, of course. And it was in the news. They're about where I sit, you know, in the studio, and then there's an equivalent room about the same size, and I think there were about 8 of us in between all of it, and the alerts going off. It was a pretty unsettling experience, and lots of people were quite perturbed by it. I had messages last night about people talking about elderly parents who were very confused, messages coming through in Welsh, for example, before they came through in English, people not knowing what on earth was going on. And then the nature of the message itself. This is what happened on the BBC last night when the alert went off as they were broadcasting live the One show around 7 o'clock.
We've got an incredible update on one of her very first One show stories.
You couldn't make that up, could you? I think it's a fire alarm.
You've got some form of fire alarm going on.
It's fine, we'll continue.
But we continue.
And Christy's not the only former host returning to the show, because Matt will be here too to
Alex Jones and Roman Kemp there valiantly dealing with those alerts going off on so many people's mobile phones. How did you react to it, and what was running through your mind when those alerts were happening? Because a lot of people quite upset by it, people talking about the kids crying and saying this really should be used for something that is major. you know, is a really, really major development. We'll talk more about that in a second, you know, not just about barbecues, essentially. And then the other big story last night, which broke at 8 o'clock, was the very sad death of Dr. Jason Arday, who was Professor Jason Arday, the Cambridge professor who had built a career, I'm afraid to say, on a tissue of lies. There had been an awful lot of reporting about how he had lied on many, many occasions. Not that you would know it from some of the reporting this morning. There's very, very sanitised reporting on many outlets, including, I'm sorry to say, the BBC. His defenders include the Good Law Project sort of high priest of the left, Jolyon Mom, who alleges that Jason Arday was sort of hounded to his death. I just want to get all of this conversation together. I want to make sure that we all have a properly rounded view of this. I disagree with basically everything you're about to hear from Jolyon Mom, but I want you to hear it because on my shows, as you know, we disagree without being disagreeable. Let's hear what Jolyon Mom had to say about the death, very sad death, of Jason Arday.
I've just come back from the cricket. I spent much of the last week trying to persuade him to come with me to the Oval because I knew how vulnerable he was. I knew he needed to be out of his house. I've been checking in with him. Is he with loved ones? I've been trying to persuade him that his life is not over. And I regret that I failed. I think the media have very serious questions to answer. Many of us were telling the media that this was a real risk. And I don't understand why those warnings were ignored. And I don't understand why newspapers across the political spectrum, The Times and The Guardian, continued to carry stories hounding him after he had resigned as a professor. What is the public interest in those stories, and what risk assessment did those outlets do of the risk of carrying those stories? A month ago, none of us had heard of Dr. Arday. None of us, at least outside of the world of academia. When Rachel Reeves was caught plagiarising her book, when Rachel Reeves was caught embellishing her CV, not a terribly uncommon thing, as anybody who's ever looked on LinkedIn will know. Those stories passed very, very quickly and really without much media comment at all. And I have questions about why that is. Those are people who are of immense consequence. Rachel Reeves, Johnny Reynolds, who claimed falsely to be a solicitor when he, I think, was Secretary of State for Business. People of enormous national importance, not obscure people. What is the difference between those stories? I think the difference between those stories is that those people are powerful white people, and Dr. Arday was a working class black man who it was convenient to our media to pull down. I would like to say that there should be some reflection now on the part of the media on how they handled reporting, which I do not think it is an exaggeration to say, hounded a man known to be vulnerable to his death.
I think it is a massive, huge exaggeration to say that Jason Arday was hounded to his death. I think that is completely untrue. And I think Jolyon Mom is massively overreacting to what has, the huge tragedy that has happened here. There have been very similar events to lots of very public people who have not taken their own lives, and I don't think you can blame journalists for that. That might be a harsh thing to say. You might disagree with that. That's fine. This narrative that, you know, he was a working class black man, it was convenient to take him down, that just completely falls into the left-wing narrative on this and totally does not acknowledge, as Jolyon Mom does not in that video at all, the fact that, unfortunately, Jason Arday was a liar, was a compulsive liar and a fantasist. And lots of what he said was in the public domain. He talks about Jonathan Reynolds, he said he was Secretary of State, who said he was a solicitor. Well, he wasn't Secretary of State when he said that, so Jolyon Mom was factually wrong in that. It was before then. Jonathan Reynolds apologised for it. There was huge coverage of Jonathan Reynolds alleging he was a solicitor when he wasn't. Rachel Reeves and her CV, I mean, where was Jolyon Mom when there was acres of press coverage of that? Loads and loads of discussion of Rachel Reeves and her CV. I just think that that was an emotional, perfectly understandably emotional post by Jolyon Mom, but there's so many aspects of it that I would take massive issue with. Charlie Rowley, what do you make of it?
Well, it is a tragedy in a sense that, a young man, 41 is not old. I say that someone that's 36, so not too far off, has felt, for whatever reason, the need, it seems, as there's no suspicion around the death, to take his own life. Whatever you thought of him and whatever world he constructed for himself, which was built on taking other people's work, it was plagiarism, it was a world of fantasy. He was a fantasist. As you rightly said, that word is absolutely right. He created achievements for himself which he did not achieve, which others believed, and whether or not that was a sort of a drug that, allowed him to sort of, create more fantasies for himself and more achievements that just were not accomplished. Running 600 miles in 6 days, appearing on a television show reportedly that had finished before he was even born, claiming not to be able to sort of read and write, but have a huge educational sort of achievement, life of
which
achievement.
Which was debunked, and the BBC is still reporting this morning that he was mute until he was 11. I mean, there are people who were in primary school, a number of people who were in primary school with Jason Arday, that said he was actually a bit of a class clown. He was someone who spoke a lot, and I mean, there are clear, disproven lies that Jason Arday said. It is a dreadful tragedy that he's dead. I wouldn't want that to happen to anyone. I wouldn't want my worst enemy to take their own life. We are nonetheless in a situation where he constructed a reality the left, Cambridge University and many others wanted to believe. They facilitated the fantasism, and what they didn't do was check the details, which you would expect the University of Cambridge to do.
And that's totally on them. And that is why, it is a world-class institution that has had a world-class failing on, in this case, when it comes to appointing someone to their educational leadership at a very senior level, and such a heralded and advertised role because of who he was. He was a young black man that had, achieved above and beyond anyone, and that was something, that is an what's the word I'm looking for? Underrepresented characteristic in somebody, and therefore that was heralded by the left. But equally, those questions should have been asked. They certainly weren't. And the more, I think, adulation that was obviously piled on to Jason Arday, the harder that the quicker you rise, the harder he's obviously fallen through the media scrutiny. The media have a job to do when someone who has been in such a privileged position, a world-class university at such a high level, has found out to have got there through lies, through plagiarism, through not being who he said he was. That is very much in the public interest. That is obviously going to be reported, and I absolutely agree with you, and I'd push back entirely. Rachel Reeves did get an awful lot of a pile-on. I mean, ultimately, I think she lost her job, because people lost confidence in her because of, the way in which she sort of claimed to be an economist at the Bank of England for 10 years, which was, not true. But the difference...
I mean, that is, and it's interesting what Jolyon Mom was saying there, as if Jonathan Reynolds, and particularly Rachel Reeves, didn't receive any form of media scrutiny because they were white, because they're powerful white people, whereas Jason Arday was a working-class black man. I mean, I would argue that there are loads of people who know very, very little about politics, who are not as engaged as our viewers and listeners, who think about and are engaged with politics and are really intelligent and pick up things all the time and have really good opinions. People who... I'm not criticising them, I'm simply saying politics is not a big part of their life. Not like you and me, Charlie, and many of our viewers and listeners, but they'll maybe listen to commercial radio, they'll hear 90 seconds of this, that and the other, they'll maybe pick up a paper every now and again, they might watch the news, they might not. But the thing they know about Rachel Reeves is Rachel from accounts who doctored her CV, probably far more than many of the other opinions and policies and so on that they put through, that she did as Chancellor. In fact, it's kind of the thing a lot of people know is she doctored her CV.
Yeah.
I just think it's totally unfair to say, well, he was targeted because he was a working class black man. He was targeted because he was a fantasist. He was targeted journalistically because if he'd been telling the truth, if the lie had been correct, well, then it would have been fine. And the sort of facilitation of his role is exactly why there was legitimate journalistic inquiry into all of that. Couple of remarks here. Ian in Essex says, firmly at the feet of Cambridge University for using him. Press just doing their job. What about the hounding of Nigel Farage? I support Nigel and no idea how he copes what he's going through. We will be talking about that very, very soon. Andrew Neil as well, the veteran broadcaster. He broadcasts on Times Radio. He's a columnist for the Daily Mail and others. Last night, just as the news broke, I'm just reading this off the screen. This is terrible news. Jason Arday has been found dead. I did tweet last week that he needed a compassionate intervention from family, friends, professionals, and not more abuse. That he was clearly a troubled person who needed help too late. So sad. JB in Aberdeenshire has been in touch as well, sending through a WhatsApp. You can do that too, 0344 499 1000. Jason Arday was a man with mental issues. He was used and destroyed by the DEI ideology pervading through every aspect of society right now. A life destroyed when in actuality he needed help with his mental state, which led him to a life of dishonesty and cheating. A sad state of affairs, says JB in Aberdeenshire. Says it all there, really.
Yeah, and you're right. Cambridge University, huge questions for them to answer because, they allowed this, story to sort of run and run, really. They propped him up. They propped up his fantasies, effectively. And there's no doubt that he might have had some, and I'm sure he did have a lot of academic achievements in between, but we don't know, which is why there was so much reporting on it, because it was a big story. And I agree with all of those comments. The family and friends, you call upon them at times of, hardship if they should have been around. Not saying they weren't around, but we don't know what kind of intervention he might have had in between the story sort of running and the kind of state that Jason Arday was in. But nonetheless, that doesn't mean that reporting should have stopped. It doesn't mean, as Julian Warren said, OK, as soon as he resigned from Cambridge, the story was over.
Yeah.
Because still to this day, despite all the outpouring from both sides, people who were saying, well, hold on, if you create a life for yourself, then you're going to suffer when the truth is exposed. And on the other side, people saying that this is a guy who was just completely hounded unnecessarily because he was black. Despite all of those two sides, we still don't actually quite know where this ends.
Well, indeed, and
how much more is there out there that could possibly have been investigated?
Absolutely correct. And within that, to support your point entirely there, Charlie, he was publishing an autobiography. This was out in America. It was meant to be in the UK. Jolyon Mum appears to say, well, he resigned as professor from Cambridge. The press got what they want. They should just leave him alone. The story's over. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
That's not. People don't suddenly stop asking questions. Simply, we're not stopping criticising or scrutinising or talking about Keir Starmer because he's no longer Prime Minister. It's not as if we say, oh right, Liz Truss, okay, well you're not Prime Minister anymore. You've resigned from that role. Therefore, we're going to completely have a complete moratorium on any discussion about your time as Prime Minister. That is just not the case at all. Sean in Gloucester says, hope you're well, Peter. Good morning. Good morning, Sean. We have had enough of the Uni Party and their lies. We must have Nigel and reform in power at the next general election, and the first step is Clacton to prove that we no longer believe the establishment project fear against reform. As for the emergency alarm, what was the point? It's been all over the news about the wildfires, utterly pointless, and hasn't the government got better things to do than muck about with that? Sort out illegal immigration, for example. I could not agree more, and thank you to that. Jeff has been in touch as well and says, morning gents, to use the nation's emergency system is crazy. In Australia it's that they have total fire ban days. That means no outdoor fires and barbecues, and is advertised through the media. So yet again the government overreacts. We will be talking about that in just a minute. I expect you, or the vast majority of our viewers and listeners, will have got that emergency alert. What did you make of it? How did you react to it? We'll get Charlie's reaction and yours. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
own Farage Fest last night, which was held in a paddock about 12 miles from where I am here at the pier. And that's where he delivered his victory speech before the count came in. And some view that as deeply controversial.
If you went to do a victory speech at the count, what you'd have had is 30 chumps there, all sort of screaming and shouting and heckling and, you know, making a big distraction on stage. And I think he's gone, that is not the image I want projected via national television, going out to the whole of Great Britain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
David in Gloucestershire is on the line. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You can too. David, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say about Jason Arday?
Good morning, Peter.
Morning.
I was going to say this is incredibly sad news, and you know the poor man when he was being forced into this situation was incredibly sad, and that's what I will say to start with. But he was a con man. He conned his way into a position and a salary, expenses in which he didn't deserve, and therefore he's little more than a common criminal.
I mean, he didn't commit any criminal acts. We just need to be careful about that, David.
No, you are a criminal if you are picking up a salary, expenses, than which you don't deserve. You know, you are...
Okay, well, just to be absolutely clear, David, just to be absolutely clear, I was never charged with any criminal act. I just wonder, David, who you think... I mean, I'm cautious when talking about what appears to be a suicide, and we don't know for sure, but it appears to be... talking about blame. People aren't to blame for this, but when you see the row more generally, when you see the fact that he got to this state where he was being, some would say legitimately criticised, I certainly think that, some would say hounded. I mean, who do you blame for the controversy itself?
Well, himself, because he got caught out, and that's the truth of it. It is little more than anybody being caught out. And that, you know, I didn't know anything about this chap until it all came out. And I was like, okay, well, you know, we all know what happened, and you know, everybody's got their reasons why this chap was elevated to a position to which he was. And you just sort of think, well, sort of this is the ultimate. You know, I've heard other people say this is the ultimate DIE hire.
Yeah, and you know, he was not hired because of his academic credentials, and if they'd checked his academic credentials, they would have made sure, they would have ascertained that he didn't have any. They wanted to believe the lie, didn't they? They wanted to believe the nonsense that he was talking, didn't they?
They did, but I think this is society. I don't know what's going on with society and the country, well, this country in its at this moment in time, and for the last few years, in which people who just straight lie and they're accepted. I mean, we've got Keir Starmer would openly lie in Parliament, in public, you know, and there's other prominent people around the government, around in the public life. You know, they're just telling lies the whole time. Even Andy Burnham, he is just out there telling lies. And
what lies do you think Andy Burnham has told?
Pardon?
What lies do you think Andy Burnham has told?
Well, he's talking about the economy being so well. You know, he's talking about these immigrants, oh, they're all welcome, and, you know, we're being...
He hasn't said that in fairness, David.
Well, he is. He's telling everybody, you know, we've cut the boats, we've cut immigration.
Yeah, we're going to be relentless and all the rest of it.
Lie. You know, it's just every which way. You know, we know it's all lies.
Okay.
You know, and we're just being told a pack of lies and gaslit at every opportunity. You know, this whole trans debate, it's a lie. You know, we're supposed to believe a lie and don't question it. Don't, you know, this is, you know, and I don't know how...
Yeah, if you don't... You're right on the trans debate. If you question facts, you know, you're a terrible, prejudiced, evil person. David, thanks. Really good points on that. David in Gloucestershire there. If you want to join him on the line, on the air, 0344 499 1000. Voice notes coming in thick and fast. Nick has this one.
Good morning, Peter. It's Nick from Loughborough. Hope you're well. Long time no see. The tragedy of this Jason Arday scenario is that I actually believe Jason Arday was killed by DEI. For had it been anybody else other than a man of colour who was getting involved in the Cambridge University professorship, etc., he would have faced far more scrutiny and would have been found out. And this issue would never have happened. Peter, have a good weekend.
Nick, thank you. And when I did the Saturday shows, no Saturday was complete without some common sense from Nick Moore from Loughborough and a voice note from him. Nick, thank you. It's great to hear from you. And please do contribute to my evening shows, 7 till 10, Monday to Friday. Maybe that doesn't quite suit you, but I always love to hear your common sense. More coming your way from Charlie Rowley as well. What do you make of what Nick was saying there and what we heard from our caller as well, from David?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to disagree. I mean, obviously, you know, there's still a bit of tiptoeing around it because, you know, a man has just lost his life and, you know, a family are in mourning. But to put it into context, you know, the family have said that they felt that Jason was subjected, and this is their quote, to a campaign of sustained abuse for more than 3 years since he accepted the role at Cambridge. And, you know, he announced he resigned due to the, quote, unrelenting level of public scrutiny. Now, we hadn't heard of this guy until that investigation had taken place, until he'd been exposed. So I don't know what, you know, scrutiny he feels he might have been under 3 years prior to. But it's obviously, you know, when you get caught out in the way in which he has done and your whole story of fantasies start to unravel,
yeah,
and it becomes very public, I can understand that will put a lot, you know, that put somebody under
It's obviously
pressure.
going to be deeply upsetting when this artifice that you have created falls apart.
Yeah.
I totally get that. But the fact is, he created an artifice. If he hadn't lied and he hadn't made up lie after lie after lie after lie, there would be nothing for the press to criticise. Or, you know, I'd love it to be true. I'd love it to be all true. I'd love it to, if you had someone who was from such a humble background, if everything was true that he had said, if he didn't speak till he was 11, if he only had 2 GCSEs and he suddenly becomes a professor at Cambridge, that's a great story. I mean, that is a great narrative. It's good for the university, it's good for the country, it's good for him, it's good for, dare I say it, black people. You know, there's lots in this that the problem was so many people, Cambridge University, wanted to believe the lies and they didn't probe the lies because they thought, a bit like a souffle, if you touch it, it'll collapse.
Absolutely. And the two things that are, you know, that can't be overlooked in this is, A, the fact that, you know, when we're talking about Rachel Reeves and Jonathan Reynolds, you know, as a professor at university, you know, it's not a shy retiring role. You know, you're at the front of a lecture hall.
Public.
You're a public person. He would have done many seminars, many sort of public events, I'm sure, where he was very happy to talk to the media. He could have perfectly, he could have answered questions.
This is my point as well. This is my point as well, OK? So Jason Arday used the media. He was someone who the media loved. He loved them. He was on all sorts of programmes. He did punditry on very high-profile things like Laura Kuenssberg's programme, for example. He gave talks around the world. He made a fortune doing that, talking about his story. You can't then say, I'm using media to build myself up, and then the media tears you down because of the lies you told. Not because they didn't like him, not because they thought he was, you know, a bad person. It was the deeds that brought him down, his own deeds that brought him down reputationally. I don't want him to die. I don't want anybody to be hounded to their death or to feel as if they've got to take their own life. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. But this idea that he was sort of hounded to his death because he was a working class black man, it's nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely. And the totally. And the second point that I don't think should be overlooked is that the police were called, you know, but when journalists were asking questions.
That's right.
You know, so, you know, that is, in my view, you know, slightly manipulative.
He also used the powerful law firm Carter Ruck as well, which is, you know, will have shut down a lot of journalists over the years.
Right.
That's their job to do so.
And it is a job of journalists to ask questions, whether you like it or not, whether you feel that you're being treated fairly or not. You always have a right to reply. But the idea when the going gets a little bit tough, or you feel you're having about, you know, if you're just being asked the most basic questions, to bring in the law or to call the police, to then, on the back of what we've on stories that have been in the media, where poor old Henry Novak, wasn't believed as a victim who happened to be white over a perpetrator that was believed that happened to be of non-white background.
Yeah.
So, using DEI and using perhaps a position to say, actually, I don't like these questions, therefore I'm going to call the police and class it as harassment. That's not nice. That's not a good approach.
Yeah.
So there are so many other questions that I think, in terms of behaviour of the university,
you're absolutely right. I think on freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and there will be a lot of people now, including Julian Mom and many others, who are saying, oh, well, there needs to be greater regulation of the press, da-da-da-da. I totally disagree with that. Joanna in Salisbury says, hi, Cardi P. Hi, Joanna, you're up early. Said, I couldn't understand last week how Cambridge University didn't check anything before hiring him. Then, when the crash came, where was his occupational support from Cambridge University? He was just dropped, and he did resign last Wednesday. Tony in Manchester says, the hand-wringing and finger-pointing after the death of Jason Arday is frankly sickening. Nobody put him in the limelight but him. Nobody told the lies about what he had done but him. As for people to now say it was right-wing, fascist, racist plan is sickening. A man has died, and to use that death to score points shows the agenda of some news channels, says Tony in Manchester, so thank you for that. We will talk about the alert. Lots of people have been in touch. Let me just hear a couple of voice notes and then we'll go to the break, and then we'll talk about it with Charlie and you, 0344 499 1000. Liam has sent in this voice note about the alarm. This was last night around 7 o'clock. It came to the vast majority of mobile phones in this country. We hadn't a clue what was going on. I thought there was a fire alarm or some major thing had happened. No, it was the government telling you, don't light a barbecue. This is what Liam says.
Good morning, Peter and Charlie. Liam from Accrington here. I woke up this morning absolutely livid with Andy Burnham for doing this bloody emergency service. What was he playing at? We already know that there's fires going on. We already know not to buy disposable barbecues. We watch the news, we read the papers, so this morning, I messaged him exactly that on Twitter. I don't think I'll get a reply from him, but you never know. Miracles do happen.
Liam, really good points. And my question in all of this was, blanket information about the wildfires, about not having barbecues. Show me the person who has any form of cognizance of the news. Show me the person who's picked up a paper, listened to a radio station, heard a news bulletin, and I don't mean the comprehensive news bulletins that you get on this station. I mean like 90 seconds on a commercial radio station that doesn't know that there are wildfires happening. There's someone who never gets any news apart from TikTok. Show me the person who doesn't know that. Show me the person who doesn't know that if you light a barbecue, this can happen. Plus, the Prime Minister said basically exactly what was in this message yesterday anyway. So was the message actually needed? Let's hear what the Prime Minister said. We're just going to hear from the Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, and yesterday he gave a media interview where he basically said almost exactly what was in the message itself. Just before we go to that clip, let's hear from Colin and his voice note.
Morning, Peter. Morning, Charlie. Colin here, truck driver from Blackburn. Just got back into the country again from Migrant Watch. Now then, what a bloody nightmare. I was in bed at 7 o'clock last night. Just got in, tucked in, nice and cosy. And then next minute, alarms are going off on my phone, wondering what the hell was going on. It said that there's a fire risk and all this stuff. So then I'm getting up, jumping up out of bed, wondering what the hell's going on. I didn't know if my truck was on fire. I didn't know nothing. What a joke. Here, I can understand why they're doing it. But come on, at least give us a clue what you're going to be doing. Not just to fire something out, because I actually, what's a polite word, crap myself. All the best, Peter. See you later, Charlie. Good luck, pal. Ta-ra.
They don't make them like Colin very much anymore. Appreciate your message there and the sparky language within it. We will talk about this more with Charlie Rhodey, who was also woken up by the alert, and we'll hear from you as well. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Politics.
Lots to discuss on all of this. Angie says maybe they should stop selling fireworks to kids. In the park next to me, the kids have been selling fireworks off for the last 2 nights, says Angie. Well, thank you for that. Sean says yesterday's phone alert and barbecue ban show one thing. Burnham is going to be the emperor of state intervention. God help us all. That's Sean from Bridlington there. John in Essex says the left have got very short memories, Cardi P, when it comes to how people are treated. Take Liz Truss, for example. She was hounded compared to a lettuce. The stunt led by donkeys was disgusting. She was bullied and treated awfully, even years after her time as Prime Minister, but now they cry foul. It is utter hypocrisy, says John. Public life is really, really rough for a lot of people, especially when you've done the wrong things. And, you know, Jason Arday should have been supported far better than he was, but he shouldn't have been put in that position in the first place. That was his fault, but there are lots of other people whose fault it was too. I want to talk about the emergency alarm. And as I said, the Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, yeah, there we go. That's what it sounded like last night. And it was pretty unsettling for a lot of people. It woke you up, Charlie.
It did. I'd had actually, very unlike me to have a hard-working day, but anyway, these days. But I had.
You're a gentleman of leisure.
I'd done quite a very late night shift, an early morning start on the back of the Clacton by-election. So I'd worked all through the night and into the afternoon, and then eventually got home for a few hours kip, only to then be woken up at 7 p.m. By this awful sound that you've just heard, thinking that my phone was either overheating or it had been targeted by some sort of scam or virus or something, or God knows what it was doing. And then I read it and thought, is that it?
Yeah.
All
the stuff we've been told up to now, and I'll come back to Charlie in a second, but I mean, if you got the alert, as the vast majority of people did, you read it. My question is, at what point did we hear anything more in the really big, scary, we're all going to die alert from Andy Burnham than we heard in this clip? Let's hear the clip from the Prime Minister.
The temporary ban on barbecues, disposable barbecues, comes in today. All retailers will be receiving notification of that ban, and we ask them to obviously implement it in full until further notice, when we can remove it. And then I would also want to say to the public, you can see what's happening. 37 significant fires across England and Wales. Please do not light an open fire, a bonfire of any kind. If you're disposing of a cigarette, take great care. This is obviously a really combustible situation, literally, and we need to respect that fact and make sure that no one is taking any risk, because you're taking risk with other people's homes, with other people's lives, if you act recklessly.
Right, so what was different about the alert than what he just said in that clip there? Why did we have to send out this big, scary alert to everybody when the Prime Minister's just said it? It's all over the media. Was there any point in this alert?
No, there wasn't. Because, as you say, people know about, the people are not stupid,
Some people are.
Well, some people are. But even if you are, pretty... not much going on upstairs. The chances of going to buy a disposable barbecue, if you go and do that anyway and that creates a wildfire, well, that's arson, right? But it doesn't require, millions of people receiving alert to say that there are 37 fires taking place in rural areas, by the way, so with a minimum and more people packed into towns and cities.
I mean, whilst it is terrible about the fires, it is awful. There are casualties, there are people in hospital dealing with this, there are people who've been put out of their homes, there are hundreds of people affected by this. It doesn't affect the vast majority of the country.
No.
So why are you sending an alert to literally millions of people, scaring the bejesus out of them for no reason?
Well, exactly. I mean, I can imagine on the back of that, there'd be more people now claiming benefits for anxiety because they got anxiety through that alert. But this is what we're now seeing, and I don't want to be... Look, I want to give Andy a bit, Andy Burnham a bit of space, having come in just as new Prime Minister. So you've got to get your feeling. But we're already a pattern is emerging of what's going on. He's flooding the space in PR. In a PR
flooding
sense.
the zone.
flooding the zone, any small thing, any low-hanging fruit that he can get his mitts on to show that he's looking busy, whether it's, you know, telling people that we're going to make it easier for you to unsubscribe from subscriptions, that, you know, where you know, companies might make it more difficult for you. It doesn't require the Prime Minister to tell us about that.
Yeah,
but that's
correct.
what happened last week. You know, bus fares capped at £2. OK, you know, they were capped at £2 before, but thanks, Prime Minister. You know, taking 20% off VAT and hospitality, right? OK, well, you did put it up, or your predecessors put it up, so you're just undo. You know, he's out there every day flooding the space, wanting to talk about the cost of living, now telling us about the fires, and sending out a public alert. It's all geared to get our focus on Andy Burnham as if he's a guy very busy, taking control of all these things, which will soon become very annoying and very quickly.
I think it has already. I mean, Keith in Nottingham's been in touch and says, "Morning, Peter and Charlie. So the government puts out a warning on our phones about wildfires. I thought the system was meant to be used for emergencies. Is the system going to be used for real emergencies, like another boatload of illegals landing at Dover, perhaps?" Diane says, "I was asleep and I woke up in a panic due to all the testing of the alarm last year and having drummed into us it was a major emergency, disasters, evacuation due to life risk, wildfires getting near me and need to leave property or war. I was utterly angry that it's being used for flipping barbecues. Who will take it seriously if they keep the stupidity up?" Diane has a great point there. Loads of people have contacted me over yesterday and today to say, "I'm switching them off."
Yes.
If they're going to send it for this, if they're going to send us into a panic, and people were panicked here. There were people, I had loads of messages last night that talked about elderly relatives really worried they couldn't read it, they didn't have their glasses. A 74-year-old woman said she was running into a room to find out what was happening, and she can't, you know, she finds mobility difficult, kids crying and all the rest of it. If you're going to do this, and sometimes maybe it has to be done, I would prefer it to be, you know, nuclear bomb falling, the Ruskies are about to vaporise you, than don't buy a flipping barbecue.
Oh, totally. And look, again, the Prime Minister shouldn't be getting involved in telling us not to, you know, or to banning disposable barbecues. You know, we have, you know, either the Environment Secretary around, I suppose, if you want to look at it from an environment point of view, or anyone else. But I'm just trying to find it, because he also tweeted out yesterday to say, you know, he was asked to put that out by the emergency services. So it's clearly backfired and angered a lot of people.
And now he's blaming them.
And now he's sort of saying, oh, no, I was doing it because...
You can't say no.
This is a Mr.
You can't say no.
But this is a Mr. Nice Guy. I need to sort of, you know, I want to please everybody, and, you know, if the emergency services ask me to do it, then he can't be blamed.
Again, there's a pattern emerging here with Andy Burnham. He throws people under the bus. Yeah. You know, we've seen that with Alex Norris, who's the Justice Secretary. All a bit difficult with PC, with
Andrew Harper.
Andrew Harper, thank you. Sorry, I was just out of my head. PC Harper's killers. Keeping them behind bars is difficult. I'm going to instruct the Justice Secretary to do that, having personally taken control of that, going backwards and forwards. And with PC Harper's family, his mother, very distressed by all of this. Now, is the emergency services telling me to do this? You get told in government, as we both know, former special advisors both, you get told to do stuff all the time. There are loads of people who say, you should do this, we really want this to happen, and it's the job of a Secretary of State or a leader, a Prime Minister, to say, no, we're not going to do it.
Absolutely, and he can't. Look, he's going for obviously all these small wins and wanting to be out, as I say, looking out there. Looking busy, being out there, acting as though he's a leader as the Prime Minister. But if you don't get a grip of those big ticket items, like the early release of prisoners who should not be out on our streets, if you're not stopping the small boat crisis, which you said you're going to do, and by the way, very clumsy language saying, actually, no, we're going to put them in middle class areas. You know, what kind of deterrent is that? I ask you.
Well, it's a whole other issue. Do you know what? We're 3/4 of the way through the Rolly Hour and Rolly News, and we're barely discussed Clacton, so we're going to do that in a minute or two. Let me just read out a couple more messages before we go to a break and then talk about Clacton and Nigel Farage's victory there. Sean says, I only got the alert because I added a second SIM to my phone for a business line the other day. My reaction immediately went into the setting to disable the alerts. Beck says, good morning, Peter and Charlie. Margaret back from Tunisia here. Hope you had a lovely holiday, Margaret. That emergency alarm scared the heebie-jeebies out of me. You wouldn't have thought we were being invaded. There again, we are, but they're not doing anything about the boats. What on earth is this government doing? Is this all part of them trying to control us again? Are they all idiots? I'm turning these alerts off. Dave says, I didn't get the alert last night. I'm sorry, but what a waste of time and money. The idiots that carelessly use these barbecues will still do so. Richard in Crawley says, lovely to see you and Charlie this morning. Thank you, Richard. Thanks for your message. I turned off the emergency alarm on my phone immediately after they announced they were going to start using it, due to knowing they would use it unnecessarily. Most people I know did the same. Love the show. Maria says, not sure if I should broadcast this, but the alert did not work on my phone last night. Some time ago, I turned it off in the settings on my phone. Deborah said, I had to laugh. That clip you showed, I think it was the BBC. It was the one show. The presenter said, oh, I think we have a fire alarm. And her response was, don't worry, we'll carry on. So basically burned to death. The show must go on. Have I told you my fire alert story?
No.
Oh.
No, what happened?
It's a bit of a moan. It's a bit of a moan. I can see the look in producer Dean's face. He knows what's coming. And Tech Up Dave as well. We're reunited like Sonny and Cher, or Torval and Dean once again. Burgess and McLean. So what happened was there was a fire drill in this building, which, as you know, is a 17-storey building. We're on the top floor. And everyone who had to keep working, because they knew it was just a fire drill, was given like a piece of paper to say, right, well, you got to keep working, you're working on these shows. I turned up to do, I think it was the drive time programme, and was told you can't go into the building, there's a fire alert. I said, well, my show starts, in an hour. I need to get in, I need to, do stuff and prepare. Got the makeup on anyway, and basically said, like, I've got to get in. They said, oh, talk to your line manager. Lovely line manager, wonderful person. I'm not criticising her at all, but she did say, oh yeah, I should have told you about the fire alarm, and I should have told you about this whole thing, and you should have come in a little bit earlier, whatever. Okay, fine, whatever. 25 minutes in, it's now 3:25, the show starts at 4 o'clock, really need to get in, really need to talk to the producers, really need to prepare. And a health and safety woman comes up to me downstairs and says, got some good news and some bad news. Okay. The good news is an exemption has been made, and just you can come in and you can go to the 17th floor and you can present your show, and we're going to help you and facilitate that because we know this fire drill is still going on. I said, okay, what's the bad news? Bad news, we can't use the lifts. So after 17 floors of steps, the makeup needed to be redone. Stay with us here on Talk.
His own Farage Fest last night, which was held in a paddock about 12 miles from where I am here at the pier, and that's where he delivered his victory speech before the count came in, and some view that as deeply controversial.
If you went to do a victory speech at the count, what you'd have had is 30 chumps there, all sort of screaming and shouting and heckling and, making a big distraction on stage. And I think he's gone, that is not the image I want projected via national television, going out to the whole of Great Britain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who's been in touch. I live in Greece, says this texter, and have the emergency alert on my phone. It goes off when there's a fire within a 30-kilometre radius of my location. It's a useful tool if used correctly, but not to tell you to not have a barbecue. Very good point. I think of Israel as well. You know, they get alerts on their phones, people there when they deal with rockets coming from Gaza or other parts from Iran and so on. And that's a very useful thing because it's literally, you know, get out of the way or you're about to die, essentially. It's not, don't get a disposable barbecue. Right. As promised, let's talk about Clacton and Nigel Farage. Famous victory there, 63% of the vote. But a man dressed as a bin got 27% of the vote as well. Should he be worried? Was this a gamble, Charlie Rowley? You think that Nigel Farage has won?
I think for him and Reform, on balance, yes. I think, look, he didn't expect the other big parties not to put up a candidate. I think, you know, he took the gamble in saying, right, I'm going to call the by-election, I'm going to let Clacton, the people of Clacton decide, and that'll put this whole sort of saga to bed about, you know, whether he's not going to be done over by Parliament to say, right, you need another by-election. He's going to call it early and expect it to be a full contest. Now, when the other parties, I think, said, right, well, we're not dancing to your tune, I think that was not something that was factored in. So he's then, I think, had to, you know, run a campaign over the summer.
There's also been the suggestion by some in Reform, actually, that Nigel Farage perhaps thought that the investigation would go away if he resigned and stood for election, and that isn't the case. That's restarted.
Exactly, and you know, immediately after sort of coming back in. So, you know, there should be, hopefully, if you want to become the Prime Minister, you'd have a few more people around you that can provide that kind of advice and give you the absolute clarity before you make these kinds of big decisions. But, you know, I think I would have sort of had my sort of teeth slightly clenched, thinking, right, I've now got to spend the next 6 to 8 weeks, you know, traipsing around campaigning against a man with a bin on his head. Not ideal. However, for him to galvanise support, to see him, I think, move back from being someone who was clearly very angry about the media intrusion as he saw it, as well as the scrutiny that he was receiving, to being, you know, fun time Nigel, you know, very well loved by the activists.
But we often didn't see that. You talk about galvanising support. It wasn't just the bin that was galvanised. When it comes to Farage, we often didn't see, I think, the kind of fun, let's have a pint, let's have a chat, Nigel Farage. It's a much more serious, much angrier Nigel Farage that we've seen over the course of that election campaign.
Totally, and I think, look, people like politicians when they get angry about causes that affect them. So you can be absolutely, you know, incandescent about the number of people that are still entering the country via small boats. You can be absolutely tearing your hair out because, you know, the government is sort of adding to the debt, and that's going to, you know, increase more borrowing, more taxes, you know, for the next generation to sort of pick up. You can be completely, you know, beside yourself on behalf of other people. I think when it's about you, and you sort of getting very angry about, you know, on being quizzed about a gift that you've received, as you call it, the £5 million gift, you know, where it's still in. I think people then start thinking, right, maybe I won't invite him to my next dinner party. I'll just let him sort his own issues out. But so Nigel does well, I think, when he is seen to be having fun, when it's, you know, as you say, the guy that I want to go for a pint with. So I think the whole campaign, on balance, has probably re-energised him. He's got more votes than what he did at the 2024.
He's got plenty of information as well about all the data, if there is another election.
Exactly.
How likely do you think that is? I mean, there are a lot of what-ifs, a lot of stages, but a lot of quite likely stages that could lead to another Clacton by-election in the autumn.
Even if there is one, and you're absolutely right, there's so many stages, but if you're a Labour MP, if you're a Lib Dem MP, if you're a Tory MP that wants to get one over Nigel, you are going to be hanging on to the process. You want to see the process, you know, by the letter of the law, and you're probably going to be slightly politically blinkered, I think, by wanting to see another by-election. I think the last thing the people of Clacton want, having voted, and I tried to work this out the other day, you know, since 2014 when they had a by-election, and they had Douglas Cardwell, I think.
Yeah, well, he was the first UKIP MP elected, wasn't he?
Absolutely. And then a 2015 general election, then a referendum in 2016, then a general election in 2017. I think every year Clacton has had to vote, bar 1 or 2 years, during COVID probably. So the last thing I think they want is a few months down the line another by-election, which Nigel, given all the data that he's accumulated, you'd imagine would probably win again. So I don't know if, even if the other political parties want to continue to maintain the line that, look, you know, not one individual can, you know, circumvent the rules of the parliamentary standards authorities and committees and all the rest of it. so we have to have a second by-election. But I think the people of Clacton would think, well, hold on, common sense should prevail. All right, if he's been found out, if he should have, by his own admission, which he seemed to move his own position over the weekend to say, over the last couple of days, to say, well, if I've just not signed a piece of paper where he should have basically declared that he received £5 million before he became an MP, or in that 12 months before he became an MP, and he didn't declare that, if that's all he's done wrong, well, I'm sorry for that. Does that really mean that we need to spend another 250 grand on a by-election? Does that mean we have to have another whole media circus for the people of Clacton to decide? I mean, I would feel pretty uncomfortable knocking on somebody's door now to say, but, you know, we're having this by-election because this is the real by-election. You know, the parliamentary stance. I think people...
Although the main parties have said they would contest it, I must say, there were 34 candidates. Only 2 of them kept their deposit, of course, as many people know, you only keep your deposit if you got 5% of the vote. 32 candidates didn't. Lawrence Fox, completely humiliated with 347 votes. The Everyone is God party only got 10 votes. Is everyone God, Charlie?
No, but I think what's even more striking than that, I think, is that there are some people that got less than 10 votes. I think there's a couple of candidates that got 7 and 8. But I think don't you require sort of at least 10 signatures, I think, to be able to stand?
You do.
So there are more people that sort of signed their forms to say, we'll say, we can confirm we're local.
Years ago, when I was a researcher, a million years ago for the BBC, on the 2007 Northern Ireland Assembly election, I spent days tracking down this guy. Basically, it was my job to get all the photographs of the candidates. I was a lowly researcher on how to get the candidates' photographs to the website. I tracked down this guy who was an independent candidate, and there were 10 signatories, and I basically tracked down the signatories, the people who'd nominated him. I really wanted to talk to him. I did eventually talk to him. And this woman was lovely. She's like, oh, yeah, this is just a nice guy. Came around and said, can you nominate me? And literally knocked the door and said, can you nominate me for this role? And I think he got 17 votes or something like that, but some got even fewer than the 10. Charlie, great to talk to you. Charlie Rowley there, political commentator, joining me for the hour. Thank you for that. And thanks to everybody who has been in touch. Plenty more to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Please do get your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes in. Plenty of calls that we will take between now and 10. We're going to speak to Philip Kisley in a second, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum, about Nigel Farage, but also about Jason Arday as well, the Cambridge academic found dead last night after that plagiarism scandal. Stay with us here on Talk Breakfast.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, it's just gone 7 o'clock. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for all your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes. If you're waking up in the last few minutes, there are some major stories around. One is the reaction to what many people think is that, and I do too, that ludicrous emergency alert from the government last night in England and Wales. It scared the bejesus out of many people for absolutely no reason. Essentially, they were telling us don't buy barbecues, don't light them, and don't start wildfires. If you don't know that, I'm afraid I can't help you. Also, we'd heard that message over and over and over again from the government. We're also reacting to the death of Jason Arday, who was a professor at Cambridge until he resigned last Wednesday. He created a complete tissue of lies about his life. He made all sorts of wild and fantastic claims that were untrue. He had lots of investigative journalism done on his record. He's now, very sadly, been found dead. I'm very careful about not saying anyone's to blame when someone takes their own life, if that is in fact what has happened. But we're nonetheless in a situation where many people are ascribing blame, including the high priest of the left, Julian Mom, who says he was hounded to death by the media. I think that's nonsense. I'll tell you why in a minute or two. We're also reacting to the Clacton by-election. Of course, Nigel Farage, now an MP again. Did the gamble pay off for him? Well, it did in the fact that he was elected again. But is he in a comfortable position, especially when it comes to that parliamentary inquiry? Loads to discuss this morning. And the Mirror says back where we started, whereas other papers are much more supportive. And Farage, I speak up for the ignored, says the Daily Express. Loads to discuss between now and 10. I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We'll take as many calls, text, tweets and voice notes as we can. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell on Twitter. You can follow me on Instagram as well at Cardwell Peter. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note. You can give me a ring. 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. So on the very sad death of Jason Arday, there has been a predictable reaction from the left in all of this. I'm going to play you a clip in a second from Julian Mom. He is a barrister who's in charge of something called the Good Law Project, which sort of prosecutes all sorts of cases, that most of which have absolutely no hope whatsoever. His view is that Jason Arday was hounded to death because he was a working class black man. My view is that is not the case. My view is that Jason Arday created an artifice around him. He was someone who had mental health issues, no doubt about that. The left, the DI mob, wanted to believe all of that. It's a dreadful tragedy. It should never have happened. He should never have been in that position in the first place. And it was inevitable that someone in such a strong public position, who had used the media to bolster his position, who had made a fortune by making public he'd published an autobiography, he'd make lots of public speeches right around the world for which he'd been paid a lot of money. There's a lot in this story. We're going to get into it with Philip Kisely in a second. But I just want to give you some of the reaction, firstly from Sadiq Khan, Lord Khan, who is the Mayor of London. I'm just reading these off the screen. And he has reacted and said, "I'm devastated for the family and friends of Jason Arday. He faced an unacceptable public hounding and campaign of abuse. I know many Londoners will be angry and upset this evening. Jason Arday was the victim of a pernicious public shaming that other people in his position simply wouldn't have faced. His death was a tragedy, but once again, it should be a wake-up call for all of us." I mean, I think we know exactly what Sadiq Khan is saying there. Let's see what Dawn Butler has said, the Labour MP, about the death of Jason Arday. She has tweeted about this as well. "I will not share my last exchange with Jason, but I hope that all who hounded him feel the weight of that every single day, and I hope that we wake up to what has happened and what is happening. Was this fair or disproportionate coverage? Tomorrow I'll say more. R.I.P. Jason." We haven't heard any more from her this morning as far as I know. Zara Sultana, the Your Party MP. She's in the same party as Jeremy Corbyn. She says, if Jason Arday were a white middle-class academic, he would not have been hounded by the British press in the way he was. My thoughts are with his loved ones. May he rest in peace. It's all about race, says Zara Sultana. Well, the fact he was an academic, the fact he was a professor at Cambridge, was partly, I'm sad to say, because he was black. There was a lie, there was an artifice, there was a story, a legend that people wanted to believe. Jason Arday used that. He used that to his advantage. It's a horrible thing that he's dead. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I don't think anybody should be hounded to suicide, but I don't think that is what happened. One person who disagrees with me is Jolyon Mom of the Good Law Project. Let's hear quite a long clip, actually, about what he has posted online about this. We'll get into this with Philip Kisley in a second for a counter view. Let's hear what Jolyon Mom has had to say.
I've just come back from the cricket. I spent much of the last week trying to persuade him to come with me to the Oval because I knew how vulnerable he was. I knew he needed to be out of his house. I've been checking in with him. Is he with loved ones? I've been trying to persuade him that his life is not over. And I regret that I failed. I think the media have very serious questions to answer. Many of us were telling the media that this was a real risk. And I don't understand why those warnings were ignored. And I don't understand why newspapers across the political spectrum, The Times and The Guardian, continued to carry stories hounding him after he had resigned as a professor. What is the public interest in those stories, and what risk assessment did those outlets do of the risk of carrying those stories? A month ago, none of us had heard of Dr. Arday. None of us, at least outside of the world of academia. When Rachel Reeves was caught plagiarising her book, when Rachel Reeves was caught embellishing her CV, not a terribly uncommon thing, as anybody who's ever looked on LinkedIn will know. Those stories passed very, very quickly and really without much media comment at all. And I have questions about why that is. Those are people who are of immense consequence. Rachel Reeves, Johnny Reynolds, who claimed falsely to be a solicitor when he, I think, was Secretary of State for Business. People of enormous national importance, not obscure people. What is the difference between those stories? I think the difference between those stories is that those people are powerful white people, and Dr. Arday was a working class black man who it was convenient to our media to pull down. I would like to say that there should be some reflection now on the part of the media on how they handled reporting, which I do not think it is an exaggeration to say, hounded a man known to be vulnerable to his death.
I think it perhaps is a massive exaggeration to say that that's what happened. What Jolyon Mom has said there, I mean, I have numerous points on that, not least the fact that Rachel Reeves and Jonathan Reynolds received a huge amount of media scrutiny for their lies, not least on this station. Philip Kisley is watching that, senior fellow at the New Culture Forum. Philip, what do you make of what Jolyon Mom and indeed people like Dawn Butler and Sadiq Khan and Zara Sultana are saying about this?
Well, on the one hand, Peter, it beggars belief, but on the other hand, it's entirely predictable. They're doing exactly the same thing that they've always done. First of all, they built him up as a diversity superhero. Now they're reframing him as a diversity tragic hero. It's all about the narrative. It's all about maintaining the ideological narrative. And it's just exhausting listening to that very performative bit of footage there, because it doesn't deal with any of the issues at all. It is, you know, it's blatant misinformation. The reason the focus was on Jason Arday. It really wasn't that much on Jason Arday. It was on Cambridge, and it was on the system, and it was on the fact that this DEI ideology, which we are all sick of, because one, we know it's dangerous, and two, we know it doesn't work. Okay, as a means of organizing your life, as an ethical system. We are just sick to death of it. That was the focus. Many people said, including myself, and I think on this channel, was, right, this really isn't about him now. This is about Cambridge, this is about the sector, and this is about the institutions. So for the usual suspects to come out and say it's about race, it's about a working class black man, that really isn't the case.
It's insulting. It's insulting when
it's just lies, because I think you just made the really good point there, Peter, that, you know, if this, you know, if he were a white middle class academic, he wouldn't be in the position in the first place, you know, and
that's the hypocrisy of all of this, because Jolyon Mom and his ilk, and I would say even more blatantly, people like Sadiq Khan, Dawn Butler, and particularly Zara Sultana in those tweets that I read out there, are essentially saying the press hounded him to death because he was a working class black man. No, he was in the position he was in because the left wanted to believe the lies. They liked the legend, they liked this idea. He fitted into their little tick box, going, oh, look, working class black man, let's make him a professor, on very shoddy evidence that was not properly probed in any way. Then the downfall comes, but the downfall is the fault of journalists doing their job, in Jolyon Mom's view, hounded to death. Jason Arday, it's a terrible thing he's dead, it's awful. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. He used the media. He was a media darling. He went on loads of different channels. He was happy to be a pundit. He was happy to give his views. The media, many of them were very happy to have him on their programmes and to fit him as someone they could understand and put into that box. But to simply say, you know, it's not because he's black, it's because he was a liar that the media scrutiny came.
Yeah, this is an obvious strategy, isn't it? This is to close any interrogation down. This is just to keep the status quo, the DEI status quo, keep things going, keep you know, difficult questions, keep people like us at bay, because they just want the same thing to continue. But we're in a situation here where, you know, one of our most prestigious institutions is now an international, well, was, you know, yesterday, an international laughingstock. Now it's at the center of a horrible tragedy in which someone has died. This is what we're up against. Someone has died. I can't help thinking about the last moments of Henry Novak's life as well. This stuff is poisonous, and we need to deal with it. As much as anything, as I said before, this is an ineffectual ethical framework. It's the opposite of an ethical framework. I remember, you know, 20 years ago, we were getting to the stage where we were beginning to be at least looking forward to a time when we were colorblind, and then everything changed. Identity politics kicked in and everything changed. And I think there's a few reasons why this kind of stuff has happened and why it's continuing to happen. What I'm seeing, what I've seen over the last few hours now is activism, performative, narcissistic activism powered by social media. And that is what's happening. That is how this stuff is being defended by the left. And this is why we're in this position at the moment. You can go back to BLM. You can go back to lockdown. You can go to trans activism. You can go to the pro-Palestine stuff. It's all the same thing. It's all maintaining this particular view of the world at any cost. And here we are.
Philip, wise words. Thank you, Philip Kisley there, Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. What do you think about what he said? 0344 499 1000. We'll take some calls in just a second. Lots in the emergency warning as well. Stacey in Wallington says, good morning, Peter. I was typing a message when the emergency warning came through. Nearly launched myself into orbit. I had 3 within an hour. Where is our emergency warning each time a boat of illegal migrants arrived? Another person says, I switched them off when they were first introduced. Craig says, my teenage kids were scared by the alert. I've now told them to ignore them as it wasn't important. This has defeated the point. If an important one does come out, how many people will ignore them now? Another texter says, this week the government have totally misused the power of Cobra and the emergency alert. Either they are power crazed or do not have a grip on reality. If we ever have a real urgent crisis, they reduce the gravitas of the situation. I want to read you a message. I read this last night, actually. This is from someone who is, someone I know, I'm not going to say who it is, but someone I know who has been in Cobra, someone who has advised the government when it comes to major terrorism alerts, who is a very serious player, was a very serious player in a previous government, someone who has given counter-terror advice to various people. And they got in touch with me and said, on the alarm, the government actually has very few tools to reach everyone all at once. Should be used for immediate threat to life circumstances only. Hard to disagree with that. Lots more to come on Jason Arday, on the emergency alert, on Farage, whatever you want to talk about this morning. Maybe we're missing something. Maybe there's something you think we should be discussing, because this is my show, but it's your show too. Well, it's Mark Dolan's show, but I'm in today and tomorrow between 6 and 10. We'll go to the phones in a second. Please do use the break, lift the phone, make the call, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
His own Farage vest last night, which was held in a paddock about 12 miles from where I am here at the pier, and that's where he delivered his victory speech before the count came in, and some view that as deeply controversial.
If you went to do a victory speech at the count, what you'd have had is 30 chumps there, all sort of screaming and shouting and heckling and, you know, making a big distraction on stage. And I think he's gone, that is not the image I want projected via national television, going out to the whole of Great Britain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Dawn in Cheshire's been in touch and says, Peter, I love this weekend because I get to listen to you. Very kind of you. Now, Burnham, the circus master, has allegedly said the fire service asked the alert to be sent out. Shouldn't he have said no? He's the Prime Minister, not a blinking PA. Great show as always. I think that's a really interesting point, Dawn, that you have made there. And I think that we need to have close scrutiny of what the Prime Minister is doing, because this is now the second occasion where he has blamed someone else for something that's his decision. When you're Prime Minister, the buck stops with you. What's he done over PC Andrew Harper? He said, the Justice Secretary needs to sort it out on these killers staying behind bars. Justice Secretary sorted out. Yeah, it's the Justice Secretary's responsibility, but he as Prime Minister has the final say. Now, oh, national alert, oh, criticism. Oh, well, the fire service told me to send it out, so, you know, not really my fault. Nothing to see here, Gov. I think we need to be really, really careful about all of this. And Andy Burnham shifting the blame. We're beginning to see it. He's not even there a month, and I think we need to keep a close eye on what he's up to when it comes to that, because he'll do it time and time again. When you're the Prime Minister, you've got to take responsibility for your actions. You can't just start blaming all and sundry. Barry's in Norwich and has some thoughts on the wildfire warning. Barry, you're very welcome to the programme. Thanks for giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say this morning?
Hi, good morning, Peter. Yeah, I'd like to make a comment on that alarm yesterday. I mean, I was in the shower for a start, right?
Okay.
And I got out and I looked at it and I thought, right, okay, you're a bit late, mate. I mean, I think that's a bit like the government are being reactive, aren't they? They're not being proactive. I mean, if they had warned us like about 3 or 4 weeks ago about wildfires, people might have took notice of it. But I had a big wildfire at the back of mine 2 days ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, right?
Okay.
It's a bit late. I mean, anybody with half a brain cell in their head is not going to light a barbecue, are they, in this weather? I mean, you know.
Tell me about the wildfire near you. What happened?
It was in a heath called Mousehold Heath, and it was quite a big one. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how it started. Do you know what I mean? But it just like just burst into flames up there. Do you know what I mean? And
that must have been terrifying.
Well, not. I was quite far away from it, but there were houses around it. The fire brigade were up there for a couple of days, and it didn't affect any houses or anything like that. But I would imagine the people living like close to it were quite scared of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, can I just ask you? Did you learn anything from the emergency alert? Was there any new information in there that you hadn't clocked already, days if not weeks ago?
Well, I mean, you can see it with your own eyes, can't you? I mean, if you've got a brain in your head, you're not going to light a barbecue, are you? Do you know what I mean? And it's the government being reactive to things. Do you know what I mean? They're not proactive, are they?
Yeah, and the point of a warning is it's meant to be basically the definition of proactive. You're meant to say, right, stop this before it happens. And we had the Prime Minister all over the media for days saying this. There can't be too many people who have completely missed this. I mean, there will be people in this country who don't know there are wildfires. There will be people in this country who, will have bought a disposable barbecue. But they're idiots.
Yeah, and idiots aren't going to listen to anyone, are they? Anyway, really, are they? I mean, I just think, the government are just. It's a bit like, was that the horse is bolted? Or
yeah.
Was that saying?
Yeah. Closing the door after the horse is bolted, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've had how many heat waves? 4, 5?
Yeah, well, I think this is the 5th one now. Yeah, certainly, yes. And on.
I mean, these alerts were supposed to be for disasters, weren't they?
Yes.
Nuclear attack and stuff like that. I mean, like you say, I mean, they're going to burst these alarms out all the time. People aren't going to take any notice of them.
Well, already, I have a load of people, I have dozens of people contacting me saying I'm switching off the alarms, Barry.
Yeah, there you go, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? It's pointless. Yeah, it's pointless. You should only use the alarm, do you know what I mean? Yeah, when you need to use the alarm. You could have put it on the news. I mean, but like you say, the Prime Minister spoke on TV, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
we all got it. Yeah, there was no need to put out a alarm last night. No need at all. Like you say, there's old people live on their own, probably wonder what the hell it was.
You must have got out of the shower pretty quickly, Barry, when what was going on, or did you continue?
I didn't actually know what it was. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, we were taken by surprise here in the office. We were thinking, what's going on?
I had the window open. Do you know what I mean? So I thought it was just something outside sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And when I got, I unlocked my phone and I saw this alert on there, and I was like, oh, wildfires. I thought, oh, okay, right, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, but it didn't really. I just thought it was a bit late. Do you know what I mean?
Well, definitely.
That happened around the country.
But you continued your shower anyway, Barry.
Yeah, I got out of the shower.
Well, listen, thanks for your call, Barry. Really appreciate it. Head and shoulders above the rest. We have some breaking news here. Heathrow warning of disruption at 2 terminals after flooding. We'll be speaking to the travel expert Simon Calder in a few minutes' time. Let me take a couple more calls and text. Nigel is in London. I know you want to talk about another Nigel, Farage this time. What do you think, Nigel?
Well, they're making plans for Nigel. That's definitely true. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
I wanted to say a couple of things about Nigel Farage. Congratulations, of course, he won his election. He's back in his seat as an MP. But I think he hasn't really stalled the possible inquiry round 2. So I don't know what he's achieved by sort of having this second election, because if this inquiry continues and goes on, then he hasn't achieved anything. The other thing I'm really disappointed in, and I've covered politics as you have for a very long time, I can't remember a time when an elected person has never attended the count.
Well, do you know what? I know of one back in 1981, Bobby Sands, who was on hunger strike in prison at the time, but I mean, he was pretty much it was pretty much impossible for him to go for Fermanagh and South Tyrone. But it is very, very rare.
Yeah, and then of course he cancelled his 10:30 a.m. speech, and he says that there was believed to be a credible threat against his safety. And of course, his safety is paramount. No one wants anyone to be injured or attacked. But there was some little sort of, I don't know if you've seen these images, I presume how this sort of spoof campaign or demonstration, which is a bit odd. And then police seem to be changing their mind about this, what's going on. So
what appears to have happened, just for clarity on that, it is an interesting one, Nigel. What appears to have happened is that the police said there could be disruption. It doesn't seem that Essex Police actually told Nigel Farage not to go. Nigel Farage and his security team appear to have then taken that and said, well, if there could be disruption, we're not going to go. That's not the same as being told, don't go. So the truth is sort of somewhere in the middle of that, from what I can see as a bystander. I don't know, obviously wasn't in those conversations between Essex and Nigel Farage, but it's perfectly true. It's perfectly possible they're both telling the truth.
Yeah, it is. It's just disappointing from my point of view that he wasn't there to put his crown on when he got elected. I mean,
I totally agree. I totally agree. He should have taken a victory lap there, Nigel, and he should have said, "Look, I've been re-elected. Look at this. Good for me." And I think we're seeing an angrier, more serious Nigel Farage. But then perhaps the circumstances are things to be angry about, and perhaps he does need to be more serious. It's an interesting one, Nigel. I really appreciate your call. Ruth's been in touch and says, about the alarm, my daughter was wearing her hearing aids, which are Bluetooth to her phone. It went off in her ears. I thought it was absolutely ridiculous over something that we're all aware of. Why? Peter says, people like Jolly and Mom are one of the problems this country faces when it comes to defending the indefensible. On Jason Arday, John's been in touch from Dorset, and he's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You can too. John, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Ostensibly, my question, a number of students allegedly complained about their grade, and allegedly, because nobody except them knows, they were accused of being racist or exercising...
I've read those reports, certainly, with Jason Arday, I've read those reports.
So there are several forms of appeal through the university. My own was, if I didn't like what my tutor said, I could ask the adjudicator.
Were you at that university? Were you at Cambridge?
No, I was never at Cambridge. Red brick.
Okay.
But basically, you've got a line of appeal. But most interesting is the Equality Act, and this is where DEI might need to look. There are no exemptions under the Equality Act. Referring to somebody as having white privilege is as equally racist as the other way round.
Totally agree.
It seems to me the university are going to have quite a problem. They're obviously setting up how extensive...
Well, there are two inquiries anyway. There are two inquiries,
Yeah, they're marking their own homework, so I'm not expecting too much there.
There have been calls for an independent inquiry. Do you think that should happen?
Well, independent inquiries usually cost lots and lots of money, and they end up inconclusive, and they cause more...
Lessons will be learned.
More heat than light. But my other point is, I'm a former practicing psychiatric nurse, and during my years in practice, I've met fantasists. Some of them were psychotic. Some of them were what we, in the old days, we used to call psychopathic, but that doesn't exist now under the old Mental Health Act. But the broader question is really, when somebody creates a huge public identity, and he has, I think Max Pemberton described it as pseudologica fantastica, his whole world was collapsing. The persona that he created, this magical, mythical character, was being dismantled bit by bit. And I hold no grudge against the press. If you want to go big time, then you're going to go down big time. But I think we don't know if he committed suicide. He said he was found unresponsive, so people will. It's a matter of conjecture.
They're saying they're not thought to be suspicious circumstances, which is the usual euphemism they use when it is suicide. But of course, we don't know, and a coroner hasn't ruled on that yet. So we'll be cautious. You're right to be cautious what we say. Of course, John. Yeah.
There is a theory that when a serial fantasist goes on to huge scales, and this was ginormous, by anybody's standards, it's their whole world. And when that world is being dismantled, the only thing they have control of anymore is their own life. Now, whether he took it whether it's an accident or not, we shall never know. Well, we may know in the fullness of time.
Yes.
But the fact is, the fantasy that he created was being dismantled brick by brick, and he had no control over it anymore. And therefore, if you can't control your life, sometimes the only option is to end it.
I mean, there's always an option, John, as you know far better than I do, but a really, really interesting points there from John in Dorset there. Thank you for those. And yeah, we've checked that there is an independent inquiry into what's happening in Cambridge, or what happened in Cambridge. For mental health support and information, you can call the Mind info line, 0300 123 3393. You can also call the Samaritans on 116 123. And mental health support and information, Mind, very, very good charity. 0300 123 3393, or the Samaritans are there 24 hours a day. I know because I've called them myself on 3 or 4 occasions, and they're a brilliant organisation. The Samaritans are on 116 123. There is some breaking news from Heathrow, warning of disruption at 2 terminals after flooding. We'll be speaking to the travel expert Simon Calder in just a second. We'll get your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes as well. Loads to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lee's been in touch and says, my wife's phone was connected to the car. It came through the speakers, made her jump while trying to drive. This is the emergency alert that has gone out about the wildfires as well. Valerie has been in touch and said, I was shocked to see in a pound shop in Norwich yesterday a full view to see disposable barbecues. Not a good idea when banned from using them. Nice to see you in the morning, says Valerie in Norfolk. Thank you. Another person says this week the government have totally misused the power of Cobra and the emergency alert. Either they're park crazy or do not have a grasp on reality. If we ever have a real urgent crisis, they reduce the gravitas of the situation. Dean in Derby says having these national emergency messages that aren't necessary will cause a cry wolf situation. Paul in Luton says all Mr Burnham has achieved is vast swathes of the country now turning off their national alert notifications. What a plonker, Rodney, says Paul. Of course, Keir Starmer's middle name was Rodney. Indeed, still is Rodney. He's still a thing. He's still around. Simon Calder is with us now, the travel expert. Heathrow in the last few minutes, Simon, warning of disruption at 2 terminals after flooding. You're very welcome to the programme. What's going on?
Oh, good morning, Peter. Yes, really, really difficult things. Again, of course, this will perhaps give some viewers and listeners a kind of flashback to the day in last year, actually, last March, where there was the unfortunate issue of having a fire at a substation which cut power. Today, what is happening is not so bad. There is flooding in the so-called central area of Heathrow, and that involves Heathrow Terminal 2 and Terminal 3. Those are the bases for, well, Terminal 2 is all the Star Alliance airlines. That's companies such as United of the US, Air India, Thai International, many others.
Aer Lingus.
Aer Lingus, of course. Who could forget Aer Lingus? And then Terminal 3, home for, well, Emirates, Virgin Atlantic, Delta, many other airlines there. So what Heathrow is saying is you cannot drive into that area. And of course, so many people do. There'll be, of course, you are very familiar. You drive through a tunnel, you pop up, you're dropped off either at Terminal 2 or Terminal 3. That isn't happening. There will obviously also be disruption to buses using Heathrow. And so what the airport is saying is, well, you can be dropped off at Terminal 4 or Terminal 5. Heaven knows how congested those are going to be. And so my advice would be to either use public transport for your whole journey. I've checked the Piccadilly line of the London Underground is working. The Heathrow Express and the Elizabeth line are both working normally. So you can use that, or indeed, if you are in a taxi, an Uber, whatever it is, you could be dropped off maybe at Hatton Cross, which is on the tube, but away from all the airport congestion. But just what people absolutely didn't need at the start of a very busy weekend day.
Well, of course, one of the busiest weekends of the year. We've got one of the busiest airports, the busiest airport in the country. How do you think Heathrow are dealing with this? Clearly, there have been a number of problems with various airports this summer. We haven't talked about the trains yet. We will in a second. But is there any suggestion that this will be dealt with today, or any news about when it might be over?
No, I've got very, very few details from the airport. They are basically saying today it is going to be an issue. If you'll recall, if you go back to March 21st, I think last year, when there was the fire and basically Heathrow was closed for a day, actually flights resumed much later on in the day. So it may not be all day today. And obviously the airport will be doing everything it can to fix that problem. But for now, and I'm guessing back of a boarding pass calculation, there will be about 130 or 140,000 people flying through those terminals. A lot of them would normally be using public transport, but of course many people absolutely depend on cars dropping them off at our big airports. And imagine, there you are, you get caught up in a bit of traffic, you're thinking it'll still be all right. Oh no, I've got to be dropped off at a different terminal and then find my way to the tube or the train and then catch a train.
And Heathrow is vast, as you know far better than most people. I mean, it is absolutely huge. And even if you go to somewhere like Terminal 2, there's a bit of a walk to actually get to where you're going, and even just a normal walk to the gates, especially from the tubes and the trains and so on. So people are going to need, if they are travelling today, maybe they're in the car heading to Heathrow already, maybe they're in public transport listening to this, or, you know, going later today or tomorrow or whatever, they're going to need to leave substantially more time for the journeys, aren't they?
Well, they are. And of course, this is also going to affect all the shuttle buses that normally take people to and from the car parks, to and from hotels, and crucially also bringing some airport and airline staff in. So heaven knows how things are going to unfold. But of course, if you're flying from Terminal 5, the main hub for British Airways, there should be no problem there, except maybe a little bit of extra traffic. Similarly with Terminal 4. But Terminal 4, as you know, is the kind of Cinderella terminal. It's stuck miles away from the rest, and just has a kind of fairly random selection of airlines there. So Terminal 2, Terminal 3, those big hubs for pretty much all the leading airlines apart from BA, please allow extra time.
Okay. Let's talk about trains, particularly another train coming off the tracks. Lewis, of course, led to some casualties. Another train coming off the tracks less than 24 hours after those 20 people were hurt when those 3 carriages derailed in a similar incident. Now a Greater Anglia train carrying around 45 passengers derailing near Wickford in Essex in the afternoon yesterday. No injuries there, but trains derailing, that's pretty rare, isn't it, Simon?
Oh, it certainly is. And the number of derailments has thankfully over the years been declining. However, to see 2 in 24 hours involving passenger trains is absolutely unheard of. The first incident, the one outside Lewes in East Sussex, was terrible, because we saw the rear 3 carriages coming off the tracks, and very sadly 20 people injured, 2 of them seriously. So So thoughts with them. And that was just completely unheard of. And then yesterday afternoon, as you say, this was a train travelling from Southend Victoria through to London Liverpool Street, and the several of the carriages came off the tracks just outside Wickford in South Essex. And while in that case the carriages did exactly what they're designed to do, stay upright, protect the passengers, there were thankfully no injuries. Deeply scary. And I'll tell you what, 2 hours after that, Peter, you were talking earlier about the alarms. Happened to be on a train travelling from Bristol to London, and all our alarms go off all at once. And everybody, having perhaps heard about the Wickford incident and the Lewis one the previous day, is thinking, oh my goodness, what's happened now? And yes, there we found out that we shouldn't be lighting barbecues.
Just tell us a little bit about that, actually, the collective experience, because I mean there were, I think, 8 of us in the 2 rooms in the studio, and you're familiar with the studio, Simon, obviously. The studio that I'm in and the control room, the top team behind the glass working in there, our phones were going off like Billy-O. There were 8 of us in that space, and the doors were open between them. But if you're in a train carriage when you've got dozens of people, there must have been a lot of consternation there.
Yeah, so what happened was that we're probably in this carriage maybe 40 people. I think we can assume that everybody had their phone switched on. Suddenly all these alarms start sounding and you're kind of looking around. What's that? Where is it? What's going on? And you imagine that it's something to do with the train. And then you kind of pick up your phone, which is doing something weird, and then you find out that here is a warning from the government not to do anything silly given the present wildfires. And I honestly, people obviously calmed down and there's lots of discussion, and then randomly a couple of minutes later some other phones started going off, so I don't know what was the story there, presumably a bit of a lag. But as you've been discussing this morning, Peter, I would class this as crying wolf. It's of course useful advice. And I think most of us would understand anyway that you've got to be really careful in the current conditions. But it just means that next time it happens, people will just say, oh, what is it now?
Well, exactly. I have a load of people contacting me, Simon, who've switched the alerts off as a direct result of this, saying it's not nearly serious enough. There are very few reasons why that should come out, why something like that should be sent to everybody's phone. And the crying wolf effect, I think, is a major one, especially as we know, Simon, the Prime Minister, wall to wall, all over the place. There will be the odd person. I mean, there are people who don't know Andy Burnham's the Prime Minister. There are people who don't know there have been wildfires. There are people who are still merrily buying disposable barbecues. Those people do exist. They're certainly not talk viewers and listeners, but they are in the country. But actually, there was nothing in that alert that the Prime Minister hadn't said yesterday. We had a clip, we played it earlier on in the programme, where the Prime Minister said basically what was in the message, yet they're saying, everybody panic, everybody look at this, everybody be on high alert. And the fact is as well, while the wildfires, Simon, are incredibly important as a story, I'm not diminishing that at all. There have been casualties, there have been dreadful things. They don't affect the vast majority of the population.
No, I was in Athens a month or so ago, and there genuinely were, as Talk reported, wildfires close to the city. And so I got an alert saying, you need to know that the wildfire is whatever it was, 30 kilometres to the northwest. And that, I think, is relevant because that's an actual fire which is in the area that you are in. It might be that you are thinking of heading out there, and it might be that you also need to know, OK, so if things get a bit closer, what am I going to do? But just a kind of general, don't like that barbecue to the entire population of every train in the country. And I dare say lots of drivers also. There you are. I would say that's much more dangerous. You're driving along, suddenly something goes off. You're going to think, oh, my goodness, what's happened? Is my family all right? It's, I think a bad call. But of course, the Prime Minister said it was at the request of the fire service.
It doesn't mean he has to do it. They can say no. He said if anybody can say no to something, it's the flipping Prime Minister. Simon, just before you go, Christine's been in touch and says, good morning, Peter. Can I ask a silly question, please? Flooding? Has Heathrow had rain? I've forgotten what rain looked like, says Christine, in the Isle of Wight. I don't think they have had rain, but we've had problems with water before, for example, at Gatwick as well.
Exactly right. Your memory is very good. Yeah. So, Christine, I would stay on the beautiful Isle of Wight. Who wouldn't want to be there in August? Because on the mainland, things are all kicking off. Yes, we had, it was actually Christmas Eve, I'm going to say 2013, flooding at Gatwick on the day before Christmas meant, I think, 10,000 people lost their Christmas holidays. Many of them spent them in budget hotels in the Crawley area, which wasn't perhaps their dream.
Nothing quite says the joy of Christmas like a Premier Inn in Crawley.
Other budget brands are available,
yes.
Other new towns as well. But no, and we've subsequently seen other problems related to flooding and hitting power supplies. Gatwick happens to be built as Heathrow is. It's relatively low. It's got rivers in the vicinity, and of course if you get flooding into your power supply, then all manner of things can go wrong. I will be trying to investigate what exactly is happening at Heathrow, but at the moment, Christine, stay on the Isle of Wight. Everybody else, if you're heading for Terminal 2 or Terminal 3, get dropped off somewhere else. Hatton Cross on the Underground is my pick.
Simon, as always, thank you. That is the travel correspondent of The Telegraph, Simon Calder. Really appreciate him joining us. Christine also says, I switched off the alarm when it was introduced. I've read 1984. She says, Peter says, can we pop to Heathrow for a free shower? I think that's probably not the best plan just at this exact moment, Peter. Let's go to Anna, who is in Horsham on the alert. Anna, what happened when you got the alert yesterday?
Oh, hi, Peter.
Hi there.
Thanks for having me on. Pleasure to speak to you again.
Yeah, and you, Anna.
I was driving home from London yesterday, and I was luckily to be at a standstill in Wandsworth High Street. That always seems to be at a standstill at the moment.
Yes.
And
the car park.
It sort of looked like, I don't know, almost sort of like the Walking Dead scenario where people had got out of their cars and there was about 4 of them sort of all like chatting to each other, and they all sort of bumped into each other. And I thought, oh, wonder what's going on there. And then my phone went off and I almost bumped into the guy in front of me,
right.
Just out of sheer shock because of the noise that my phone...
Well, it's very disorientating. I was definitely it was 1 minute before I went live on air. I mean, it was very disorientating wherever you are, whatever you're up to say nothing. And Anna, I mean, I'm going to assume that if you were driving a car and, I'm going to assume that you're not someone who, has disabilities or anything like that. There are loads of people getting in touch with me saying, my 86-year-old mother has dementia. She was freaked out by the whole thing. My kids were crying.
My 80-year-old mother luckily actually turned hers off months ago because she thinks the whole thing is ridiculous. Anyway, she said she'll turn it on if we go to war or something.
Yes.
My 90-year-old father slept through his, and
impressive.
my autistic son is living in a placement at the moment, but I would be really interested to know how he dealt with it.
Goodness me. Well, Anna, listen, thank you for your perspective on all of that. Very well done to your father as well for sleeping through it. That is an ideal to which we all aspire. And I do know someone who once, a friend of mine once slept through an earthquake in Japan, which was kind of interesting. We'll talk more about all of this in just a second. Let me just read a message from Mary in County Down, who says, Farage swerving the election result even during the height of the Troubles when some in Northern Ireland politicians had been murdered. MPs like Nigel Dodds of the DUP had survived IRA assassination attempts while at his son's hospital bedside. They still attended a count and results with police protection. Farage has no excuse for not attending Clacton. The police would have ensured his safety. So what do you think about that? Another text from Ben in Belfast says, the phone alert last night is straight out of the government's COVID handbook. What's next? stay home, save lives. Lots to discuss on all of this. We'll also talk about Burnham bypassing villagers opposed to new asylum sites and free Vodafone SIM cards given to channel migrants. This is all against the backdrop of the big debate about moving migrants to middle-class areas. Has dominated a lot of our coverage this week, and now legal challenges coming for the Prime Minister. What do you think? 0344 499 1000.
The other main parties, Labour, the Tories, the Lib Dems, they didn't turn up. They bottled it like a bunch of cowardly chickens. And in so doing, they were greatly rude and discourteous to the Clacton constituents. And sure, not everyone's going to like a particular candidate, in this case Nigel, and they were left with having to vote for a bin. And I just think it is a grave discourtesy. What it actually shows is that all the other parties, they threw themselves in the bin.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Enid says, morning Peter, as I had enough sense to switch the emergency alarm off before the last so-called emergency, so I unfortunately do not get them, and as I'm not an imbecile, I don't need them. Nice to see you in the morning, says Enid. Simon says, go into settings on your phone, turn the stupid alerts off, job done. No one needs to hear pathetic emergency information from the government. Smacks of the COVID nonsense and other such panic merchant fueled shizzle, says Simon from Durham. Don't think I've said the word shizzle on the air for a while. Let's talk about some migration shizzle. Robert Bates is Research Director of the Centre for Migration Control. Legal challenges perhaps coming to the Prime Minister this week, and Burnham accused of bypassing villagers opposed to new asylum sites in middle-class areas. Robert, this controversy has gone on for much of the week. Where do you think we are now on Saturday morning at 5 to 8?
I think if I was the Prime Minister, I would be absolutely embarrassed about the way I've handled probably my first migration challenge, because what he's really opened up here is a debate about, of course, actually the crisis itself, but in terms of how do I feel about it, how do I feel an appropriate response to this should be conducted. And what Andy Burnham has basically said is the kind of thing he was saying whilst he was Mayor of Greater Manchester, which is, I think actually this is a crisis that is going to continue. I'm not going to try and make any effort to stop the actual crisis, but instead I'm going to spread the misery somewhat. I think when it comes to the legal challenges, that is politically a huge problem.
I don't know what you think. Well, I do, because you just told me, but it strikes me as just an admission of failure. Oh, well, there's going to be loads of asylum seekers, so everyone's going to take their fair share, everyone's going to get them, and the infrastructure will be fine, we'll put it in middle-class areas. There's so many issues around this anywhere in our country, whether it's a poor area, middle-class area, whatever. The expense is going to be even greater when it's in middle-class areas too. When it comes to the legal challenge, how serious are those legal challenges, do you think? What chance do they have of succeeding in your view?
Well, we saw similar efforts in Epping. I don't think they probably actually will be able to stop legally the imposition from the Home Office onto those areas. But actually, I don't even know if that is the intent of these. I think politically they will be far more damaging, because you have the sort of narrative of individuals trying to stand up, politicians trying to stand up for their community, and it's being imposed on them by a clothed Whitehall who frankly don't actually care about the well-being of that community. And this...
Oh, Robert, you there? I think he's frozen. Yeah, he's frozen. We've lost him. Julian, we'll see if we can get him back. Julian in Newport has been in touch and says, Peter, here in sunny Wales, we got the emergency alert in Welsh, which is not very helpful if you're one of the 90% of people here in Wales who don't speak Welsh. If it was an emergency, then we would be totally clueless as to what is happening. Completely pointless alert that I couldn't read anyway. Well, thank goodness it was just about barbecues, Julian, rather than an alert about, you know, being vaporised by Moscow. That wouldn't be helpful in Welsh, would it? Lots to discuss in all of this. Jason Arday, loads of different messages coming in. On the alert itself, I want to take a voice note from Elisa in just a second. We've had quite a lot of voice notes coming in on the alert, and Jason Arday as well, and various other things as well. You can send your voice notes in 03444991000. Let's hear what Elisa has to say.
Good morning, Peter. This is more of a question than a comment. The decision to send out this terrifying alert, could it have been decided at that Cobra meeting? I'm just asking because I don't know. How do they come to these decisions? And does anybody ever think about the consequences of making a decision? Do they not know about problem solving? Do they not think about what would happen if I did this and what would happen if I did that? Clearly, incompetence, yet again, from this government.
Elisa, thanks for that. Let's hear from Lisa.
Morning, Peter. It's Lisa from Canterbury. I'm just wondering if there could be a government warning over the crisis with the immigrants. That'd be fantastic. Thanks. Bye.
Let's hear from Hev on Jason Arday, the Cambridge professor who has died.
Good morning, Peter. Hev from Kent. It's a shame when any life ends, but why has Arday's life ended? It's ended because he got caught out, basically. He just lied upon lie, upon lie, upon another lie. I mean, we know a list of lies, but there's probably plenty more. Some people are compulsive liars. And then the thing is, they can't manage or handle it when they actually do get caught out. It's sad, but, you know, whose fault is it? It's nobody else's fault but the person that triggered the media to be involved in the story. So I'm sorry, it's nobody else's fault but his own, I'm afraid. Sad, but true.
Thanks for that perspective. Let's hear one more voice note before the 8 o'clock news from Pauline.
Good morning, it's Pauline from Salford. Jason Arday was not hounded to death by the press. The press were basically just doing their job. I think the people that are far more guilty than the press are Cambridge College. They were duped, absolutely duped by him. He was a compulsive liar. And it's very sad what's happened, but I think, to be perfectly honest, I don't think anybody can be surprised. But Cambridge University, well, haven't they been made to look like absolute idiots?
Pauline, I agree with every single word of that. And the worst thing is, and I would add to what you said, Pauline, they wanted to believe the lies. They fitted the narrative that they had. Loads more on all of this. We'll talk about Clacton and Farage, something we haven't really done, in just a second with Farage's biographer.
Some breaking news here. The Crowborough Army Training Camp could hold male asylum seekers all the way until 2030. Goodness. After the Home Office claimed it would only be for 12 months. Not much ambition involved in that, is there, in terms of solving the migrant crisis?
Absolutely, and the way that the Labour government gaslit the public when the migrants were first moved in there, saying, you know, you guys are absolutely being mad. Crowborough is a quiet, leafy town in East Sussex. These people, you can see, have been pushed to their absolute limit. They're not the types that you usually see protesting about this sort of thing. But that town has been absolutely desecrated.
You're ruining the country. Get Keir Starmer out. Look, England flag. You're useless. Labour Party's useless.
I love our country. And one of the things about our country is good manners. Not very British.
What Labour advisor thought she wasn't going to be heckled at a petrol station in Leeds? Do these politicians actually ever get out and understand what it's like for real working class people? I thought it was British to exercise a right to free speech. That's what Keith Stalin told Trump. That's what White Van Man was exercising yesterday to Richard III. Oh yes, I remember. We're not really allowed our right to free speech in case we criticise the government.
You can't blame people so many decades away from you for the chaos that has been caused by Labour.
This is cheap politics, isn't it, Syrian?
Well, it's stupid politics. I mean, who raised national insurance on part-time workers? Labour. Who's been the stupid people that have wandered down the road and increased taxes on businesses and on individuals? Labour.
A lot of people get very frustrated, especially when the government says, oh, free school meals, you know, for every kid, not just the kids who really need them, free bus passes, free this, free that. None of it's free. It's subsidised and paid for by the taxpayer. And we're in this constant situation where the government's answer to everything is tax us a bit more, take more of our money, and then give some more of it away generously. It's our sodding money they're giving away.
Yeah, exactly. And it's either someone else's money today, another taxpayer, or even worse, it's the money from our future selves. And we keep making this mistake in Britain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. It's just gone 8 o'clock. This is Talk Breakfast. Peter Cardwell here sitting in for Mark Dolan this weekend. Thanks for your company. Loads to discuss. Jason Arday's death, the professor at Cambridge who built his reputation on a tissue of lies, has been found dead last night. Lots of reaction to that. Nigel Farage is a member of Parliament again. His biographer joins me in a second to deconstruct that and to see whether the risk has paid off. It's paid off because he's an MP again, but what are the longer term implications? A lot of what ifs in this, but there could be another Clacton by-election within weeks. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the trains derailing. We'll talk about the emergency alert last night around 7 o'clock, which has really disturbed quite a few people, and so many people saying, hold on a second, why on earth do we get an emergency alert simply about barbecues? If there is an emergency alert, it should be about, I don't know, an emergency. Loads to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. We'd love to hear from you. Whatever is on the tip of your tongue, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. And as I say, do follow me on Twitter at Peter Cardwell or on Instagram at CardwellPeter. Loads to discuss between now and 10 here on Talk Breakfast. And can I just say it's lovely to be back on a Saturday morning. You may remember I did the 10 to 1 show for some time. I'm now, of course, in the evenings between 7 and 10. And there are some people evenings don't suit. There are some people more mornings don't suit. And it's lovely to hear from some of the people who are more morning people than evening people who have been in touch. So thank you to everybody who has sent a message in. We'll get to the calls in just a minute. But I want to speak to Nigel Farage's biographer, who wrote an excellent book called One Party After Another about Nigel Farage. That is, of course, the broadcaster and journalist Michael Crick, who joins me this morning. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Peter.
The Clacton by-election was a decisive victory for Nigel Farage. Of course, he was against 33 basically novelty candidates, not all of them, but most of them. Only one of those candidates managed to not lose their deposit. That was Count Binface. Where do you think Nigel Farage stands now? He's back as an MP, but in your view, has the Clacton gamble paid off when it comes to the by-election, Michael?
Well, not really, because, I mean, you would have expected him to win Clacton. It's
it's for 30 years, it's been a sort of Brexity reform type, UKIP type seat. I mean, way back in 1997, when Sir James Goldsmith's referendum party were fighting seats all over the country in that election, the area of Clacton, then called the Harwich constituency, is where Goldsmith got his highest vote in the entire kingdom. So it shows what kind of seat it is. It's very white. It's about 97% white. A lot of retired people there, people who've retired from London, particularly the eastern part of London. And there is severe deprivation in the community of Jaywick. So you would have thought it was exactly the kind of place where Reform were going to do well. And of course, that's where UKIP got its first Westminster MP back in 2014. So no surprise that Farage won. He miscalculated because he thought that all the big parties would contest the by-election, which they didn't. They decided it was a stunt, in just the same way that Nigel Farage, when he was leader of UKIP in 2008, decided that David Davis's by-election in Holton, Price and Howden was a stunt, and UKIP boycotted that. So Farage should have seen that coming. It's been a diversion for him. He looks a bit of a chump when Count Binface, a joke candidate, got 26% of the vote. I mean, that must be, goodness knows what the highest that a joke candidate's got before. But I mean, it's a big multiple of what the previous record was. And then he's looked so bad-tempered and angry all the time.
Well, I want to get into this, Michael, actually, because so much of the image, and you know this far better than most people because you've written that excellent biography of Nigel Farage, which I highly recommend, which is called One Party After Another. A lot of his image has been built on, I'm the bloke down the pub, I've got a pint, like a fag, let's, nip out and have a pint together. I'm the smiley, happy Nigel Farage. Whatever they throw at me, I will stay smiling. He's not smiling now. We've seen a much more serious, much more irritable, I would argue, Nigel Farage in the last few months. So much of that is to do with the Christopher Harborne allegations. And he does have form for turning in a sixpence and, being angry with people. You've detailed in great depth about how he falls out with people. But we're seeing a slightly different Farage publicly, aren't we?
We are. And this is the Farage that a lot of people have seen privately. I've seen it privately from time to time. And, when he falls out with people, he can get very snarly. He can look like a fierce, wild cat, as we saw in that incident at an airport about 6 weeks ago when he was starting to be asked about Harborne and other things. And, if Farage had just said, well, actually, I thought it was perfectly OK not to register this £5 million, but I've looked at the rules again and maybe I should have registered them. And OK, here it is registered. He could have diffused all of this weeks ago. Now, there are now other allegations about benefits in kind from through his advisor, George Cottrell, so-called Posh George, this extraordinary young man who's incredibly wealthy and who was convicted of wire fraud and went to jail in the United States some years ago. So he could have diffused all that, but it seems almost to be now a reform strategy, be angry and aggrieved and complain all the time.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, Kemi Badenoch has made that exact point and called them woke, which I expected not go down too well in Reform HQ. Also, within that irritability, he didn't turn up for the Clacton count. I want to get your thoughts on that as well, because we had a texter from Northern Ireland actually mentioning that historically, even when the IRA, for example, targeted politicians like Nigel Dodds of the DUP, targeted him for assassination while at his son's hospital bedside, he still turned up for the counts. It was actually another Northern Ireland MP, Bobby Sands, in 1981. He didn't turn up for the count. He was on hunger strike in prison at the time. But that's the last time that I've seen or read about a by-election candidate, or winner anyway, not turning up for a count. It was a bizarre row about security as well. Just before I get your answer on that, Michael, I just want to play a clip of Lee Anderson. He is the chairman of Reform UK. And speaking of sort of irritability, and speaking of getting a bit snarky, Lee Anderson certainly wasn't happy, I hope that's a fair characterisation, with the BBC interviewer, and this is what happened yesterday on BBC Breakfast.
Is it true that Mr. Farage was notified, as he said he was, by Essex Police of a security threat?
Well, Nigel said during his speech, he said he'd been told not to turn up because there could have been, a bit of bother there within, inside the county and all. So he's took the advice, and I think he's done the right thing. And like I say, Charlie, I think his time is better spent saying a massive thank you to the hundreds of people, the thousands of people that's turned up over the past month to help him secure this historic victory.
Understood. Essex Police, BBC understands, say they didn't advise anyone not to attend.
Yeah. Well, sometimes some of these police forces that we've been dealing with recently are about as honest as you lot at the BBC.
Okay, so you're saying that Essex Police, that they're not telling it how it is when they say that there was no advice to your party leader not to attend?
I've not spoken to Nigel about this. I've not spoken to Essex Police. If Nigel gets up on stage and says that he's been advised not to attend the event, then I believe Nigel above the police and especially above you lot at the BBC.
I definitely want your reaction to that, Michael, in a second, but could it be the case that both Essex Police and Farage's people are telling the truth? Because if Essex Police said things might kick off or there might be a problem, and Farage's people have said, right, well, that means we're not going, it doesn't mean Essex Police necessarily said there will be a danger and you don't need to go, or you shouldn't advise against going. I just wonder if both sides could hypothetically be telling the truth, and maybe this row is just lost in translation. I'd also be interested in your reaction to Lee Anderson's words and manner there.
A difference in understanding, and it could be that Essex Police were merely saying that Binface's supporters or somebody else's supporters at the count might be a bit rowdy and, a bit of chanting and heckling and so on. But hey, politicians have to get used to chanting and heckling. It's an occupational hazard, and good, confident politicians deal with it. And the extraordinary thing is Farage talked about how he didn't want to be demeaned and humiliated by nobodies in attending that count. What kind of politics? I mean, can you imagine Winston Churchill or Margaret Thatcher or Tony Blair talking about the possibility that they might be demeaned or humiliated by nobodies? And who would he mean by these nobodies? I imagine he meant Count Binface. Well, Count Binface isn't a nobody. He's a highly intelligent guy.
He's a guy dressed as a bin, Michael. I mean, it's not exactly who you want to be standing aside, and, including the person who says they're from the Everyone is God party.
The more relaxed Farage of old would have turned up, basked in his victory, and turned to Binface and say, well done, extraordinary, you got 26%, but, you had the courage to stand against me, whereas all the others ran away, he should have said. Yeah. And by the others, he would have meant Conservatives, Labour and so on. And Restore, by the way, Restore Britain. And the Rupert Lowe's party, that are a real threat to him now. And then... he could have diffused the whole thing, but instead of which, it makes it look like Farage has run away. And of course, he not only didn't go to the county, cancelled a rally that was due to take place that morning. So what Lee Anderson said about being with his supporters and so on doesn't really hold true. And what Lee Anderson, I mean, I don't think that any broadcaster needs a lecture from Lee Anderson about honesty. When this was the man who, when he stood for Parliament, when was it? 2019, manufactured, someone on his doorstep as an ordinary voter, and it turned out to be one of his mates.
Well, that was your report. That was your report, wasn't it? That hot mic. He had the microphone on, and he said to his supporter, "Pretend you don't know me."
But something more serious here is that is the question of whether reform, on Thursday night, Friday morning, we're making more of this. We're implying there was some kind of terrorist threat, and we're exploiting the current atmosphere of obvious concern about such things, given the murder of Anne Widdecombe and so on. In other words, were they over-egging it in exactly the same way that Reform people, all of the high command of Reform, made a great thing about how Sky News were harassing and hounding Farage's daughter, when all that happened is that one Sky producer went and rang the doorbell at Farage's former home, found that Farage wasn't there, and went away again. And they made a huge issue of that. In fact, it was one of the issues that Farage brought up when he called this by-election. And frankly, Reform were lying when they did that. It was a collective lie. And I just think that they are playing far, they're much more respectful, shall we put it that way, much less respectful rather, of the truth these days. And this anger, this grievance isn't just Farage, it's all of them. It's Anderson. It's particularly thingamajig, the Yusuf guy.
Zia Yusuf, let me just put a point to you, Michael, which I think it was sent in a few minutes ago, but I think it disagrees with your point. It's from L, who has messaged me to say, am I bothered that Nigel gets angry? Hell no. What people like Michael Crick don't seem to get is what we like about Nigel is his sincerity and authenticity. If someone had turned up at my daughter's door from the press and I was a politician, I would be absolutely furious. You've also got to remember what's going on in the background that none of you know about at this time. Nigel has every right to be angry, just as he has every right to have a beaming smile and a pint in his hand. What would you say to L, Michael?
Well, he has got every right to be angry, and he can run a campaign based on anger, but I don't think it'll work, because I think anger might appeal to the hardcore of Reform voters, which are round about a quarter of the population, and that's the voting figure.
I mean, he won the Brexit referendum based on a lot of things to do with anger with the EU, for example. It has proved a successful strategy in the past.
I think, but it also, that was combined with the old Farage, the Farage that could poke fun at himself,
fair point,
could have a laugh, share a joke, all of those things, the relaxed Farage. And that Farage has disappeared since the Harborne allegations came out. And I think it will not appeal to those voters that he was winning over before last summer, when they were hitting 35% in some polls, and now they're down 10 to the mid-20s, so they're down to their hardcore. And if he's going to win over more Conservatives, more Labour people to the Reform side, I do think he needs to return to the Farage of old. And so do his colleagues. I mean, some of them just Zia Yusuf, for instance, seems to be. I've never even seen him smile, and Richard Tice can be very unfriendly these days. But they need to be more relaxed and recognise that we can't be angry about everything in life all the time. We've got to laugh about things, and we've got to be be respectful and gentle towards our opponents. Again, Farage used to be very good at that. Indeed, often it was on television and radio programmes that he got on with people who criticised him now. Whereas, it is a new man. Now, of course, what's going to happen now is that the Parliamentary Standards Inquiry is started again. And it's going to take many months, and I think there are going to be new allegations. The stuff about I mentioned George Cottrell, Posh George, and whether Farage got gifts in kind in terms of staffing from George Cottrell, and should he have declared that? So that will extend things. So it could be that the second Clacton by-election won't take place till next spring. May even, or even beyond that. And Farage will win it again, because Clacton is that kind of seat.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that the whole nation thinks that Farage was justified in not declaring these things.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that the whole nation thinks that Farage is wonderful.
OK, Michael, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate that analysis from Michael Crick, who is the author and broadcaster. He's written a book called One Party After Another, which is a biography of Nigel Farage. Kev has been in touch from Southampton and said, people forget that Nigel's house was nearly firebombed. Anne is dead, so people still want Nigel to be an open target. It is crazy. Gary says, I think Nigel's clip was played back. He never said that the police had advised him. I didn't allege that he did, by the way, Gary, but you're not saying that. That's fine. As for Michael Crick, and the many times I've heard him comment on Farage, I've never heard him give a non-biased account. I think it's fair to say, and I'm sure Michael Crick wouldn't mind me saying this, he is a Farage sceptic. I think that's pretty obvious. But we have a variety of opinions on this programme and on this station. we have many reform voices. We have some people who are not reform voices as well and are sceptics of reform. Michael Crick happens to be one of them. Ellie says, great to hear you this morning. I am not surprised Nigel is irritable when he had serious death threats on him and his family, and then what happened with Anne Widdecombe. Thank you for that. Chris in Newbury says, so the government decided to use an emergency warning system because the firefighters wanted them to, as many suspected the system will now be used to cause fear and panic when none is needed. Phil has been in touch as well and says, good morning, Peter. Great to see you on a Saturday. Thank you. Just filling in for Mark Dolan today and tomorrow. Back on the usual shows 7 till 10, Monday to Friday as well. Phil says, so the alarm was sent in Welsh to Wales. How many languages was it sent to cover all our major cities? 20 or 30? It's a very, very interesting point. On a final one on Nigel Farage. Before we go to the break, and we'll go to the debate desk in a second as well. Jason says the witch hunt in the press against Nigel and reform is way over the top. He's fully justified to be spiky with them. They're a disgrace. Crick is wrong, in my opinion. Well, whatever you think, whether you agree, disagree, think I'm talking sense, think my guests are talking sense, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it, 0344 499 1000. Debate desk next. Stay with us.
The other main parties, Labour, the Tories, the Lib Dems, they didn't turn up. They bottled it like a bunch of cowardly chickens. And in so doing, they were greatly rude and discourteous to the Clacton constituents. And sure, not everyone's going to like a particular candidate, in this case Nigel, and they were left with having to vote for a bin. And I just think it is a grave discourtesy. What it actually shows is that all the other parties, they threw themselves in the bin.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much for your company this morning. It is breakfast. I'm Peter Cardwell, in for Mark Dolan, and I'm delighted to say we go to the debate desk now. That's a really good idea, actually, for a segment. Where did they get that idea for the debate desk? Oh yes, it was my show. That's right. Claire Multoon is with us, the broadcaster and commentator. Good morning, Claire.
Morning, how are you?
And great to have Myron Sentil Nathan with us as well, the Reform UK activist and campaigner. How are you? Happy man after Clacton, I'm sure?
Very, yeah. It was onwards and upwards, I think. Let's see what happens.
Okay. Let's talk actually a little bit about Clacton. There are loads of things to talk about this morning, but maybe we'll start with Clacton actually. What is the truth, in your view, from your understanding, of this row about who said what to whom, about whether it was dangerous for Nigel Farage to go to the count, to not go to the count? What do you understand to be the truth of that? And actually, could both sides be telling the truth? Because maybe Essex Police said there might be something might kick off, and Nigel's security people might have said, well, right, there's a risk, we're not going.
So I think there was something from the police that was kind of voiced to the people of Reform, and I think there's a question of when does disruption start to spill over into a security threat? I mean, heckling is one thing, shouting is one thing, it can be quite humiliating standing next to Bin Face and all the rest of it. But then when you get...
He put up with quite a lot of heckles previously.
Yeah, so he's pretty thick-skinned on that. But then you start thinking, well, what if they start throwing stuff? What if they start getting on the stage? And then suddenly you start to realise, is it a security threat? And I think Nigel, look, he's come to a position where he thinks, do you know what? First of all, it could be a security threat, who knows? But the second thing is, am I going to give the media what they want, like the hostile media what they want, which is basically him next to Bin Face with people heckling? And I think he made a decision to say, look, that's an image and a clip that's probably going to like proliferate for days, weeks, months ahead. Whereas if he just doesn't turn up, he protects him.
Lots of other politicians, Claire, have stood against Burnham, stood against Bin Face. We've got people dressed as foxes, all the rest of it. What do you make of this?
I think it was a really poor show of Farage not to stand.
And why doesn't he just take a victory lap?
I mean, it was for his constituents. That's the reason he should have turned up. It was giving them the man that they voted for, and he should have had the respect for the electorate to stand there as the elected member of Reform, even although they had the longest ticket in history for the
34 candidates.
34 candidates
on the ballot paper.
Don't keep reminding me of Jeremy Kyle going through every single one of them, please, Peter. That's just stuck in my head there.
Shall we play
I think
it again?
it was a really.
No,
we don't need to do it now. We're not
let's not do that. Let's not inflict that on people.
No.
I was disappointed the guy from the Everyone is Gold party only got 10 votes.
Oh, that was a bit angelic. Perhaps he forgot his wings. But we need to remember as well...
Is everyone gold?
No.
OK.
There is only the one
I can get into that if you want.
There is only the one omnipotent one.
Claire Muldoon. Anyway, yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, on Farage, you think he should be there. It's interesting, on a more serious note, Myron, that even in the dark days of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, people who were targeted for assassination, and, a texter made a very, very good point about Nigel Dodds, the former DUP parliamentary leader. He was targeted for assassination. His son was very unwell, later died, was at a bedside. He was targeted by the IRA. He still went to the count. So even if security is a factor here, it's the police's job to keep Nigel Farage safe.
It is the police's job to keep Nigel Farage safe, but can we trust the police completely? I think the Anne Whittaker case raises questions about the police and how they treat security around
just be very careful about that, because obviously an active case.
It's an active case, I'm not going to go into it, but it raises questions. But I think, look, you asked the people of Clacton, you say it was for the constituents of Clacton.
Yes, indeed it was.
And I think if you ask the constituents of Clacton who voted for Nigel Farage, they wouldn't care at all about that. I think they're just happy, they're loyal. I think it rejuvenated the base, and I think I don't think it played any kind of like any kind of negative spin towards his own people. I think he did what he did. The people are loyal to him. He won a stomping victory, and I think that is the conclusion of the whole kind of election campaign.
He had the Farage Fest, the festival.
Yeah.
There would have been security. There would have been bags checked. There would have been whatever. There was no reason on earth why Nigel Farage could not have stood for the count and received the election victory that he got.
Is it that big a deal, Claire? Doesn't matter.
It's the optic, Peter. It's the optic in today's political arena.
But Myron's right, isn't it? They wanted that photo of him, but they wanted that moving footage of him looking ridiculous beside a guy with dressed as a bin.
No, I really don't think they did. I mean, we're going to talk about scrutiny in regards to the death of Jason Arday in a minute, I'm sure.
Yep.
And I think scrutiny is not bullying. Scrutiny is, and don't get me... Politicians are the first ones that want to be there with all the photo opportunities. Where was Farage? He gave that 20-minute monologue, the 21-minute monologue, when he resigned and then put Clacton into a by-election. And then with this scrutiny now over the 5 million, they might be finding that the people of Clacton might have to go through another by-election again.
But this whole count attendance thing is very much a media story. I think if you just go out and ask people in Clacton, do they care? They don't care. The wider public.
Asked them?
No, but I'm speculating. But I would say you ask the wider public, do you care? I don't think anyone cares.
Speculating hugely by talking for people.
No, it was very telling just the next day when Richard Tice went on the news round. It was the question that all the media people want to ask, but I just don't think people on the ground really care that much about the count.
People in the media were asking the question because the police seemed to give a different, offer a different reason as to why Farage didn't turn up. So that's the reason why there was scrutiny.
Fine, you can scrutinise that reason I've made the point about in terms of disruption turning into a potential security threat. But as I said, whether the morality of turning up to account, I don't think the wider public care about that.
Final word from Claire on this?
It's respect. It's not about morals.
Okay. We will talk more, as Claire mentioned there, about Jason Arday in just a second. Loads of people getting in touch about the death of the Cambridge professor and all the factors around this pretty extraordinary and very disturbing story. I'm also going to play this clip again after the break from Julian Mom, who is from the Good Law Project. He's a barrister, and he says that Jason Arday was hounded to his death by the press. I think that is unfair and wrong. We'll talk about that with Claire and with Myron in just a second. So stay with us here on Talk and have your say as well here on Talk Breakfast by giving me a shout. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, let's talk now about Jason Arday. He is the Cambridge professor who was found dead yesterday in Battersea in South London. Huge controversy over many weeks about plagiarism, about lies that he told, about the artifice that he built, the legend essentially of his life that simply wasn't true. Loads of contradictory evidence about that. Great investigative journalism occurred. He was put under huge pressure, no doubt about that. But it was a pressure he put himself under as well because of the tissues of lies that he told. We also have the fact that Cambridge University has talked about that their their thoughts and prayers being with his family. There's also the question of blame. Now, we need to be really careful when someone takes their own life. If that is in fact what has happened here, we're told there are no suspicious circumstances. That's usually a euphemism by the police for suicide. We don't know that for sure because a coroner hasn't ruled on that, but it is a reasonably safe assumption here at the moment. But I just want to put that slight note of caution there. There's a man called Julian Mom who is a friend of Jason Arday. He has put a post out where he alleges that Jason Arday was, in his words, hounded to death by the press, or words to that effect. This is a bit of a longer clip than we'd usually play, but I just want to hear from Julian Mom, and then I want to hear reaction from Myron and Claire on the debate desk, and yours too, and you can get in touch 0344 499 1000. Let's hear what Julian Mom, a barrister from the Good Law Project and friend of Jason Arday, has to say.
I've just come back from the cricket. I spent much of the last week trying to persuade him to come with me to the Oval because I knew how vulnerable he was. I knew he needed to be out of his house. I've been checking in with him. Is he with loved ones? I've been trying to persuade him that his life is not over. And I regret that I failed. I think the media have very serious questions to answer. Many of us were telling the media that this was a real risk. And I don't understand why those warnings were ignored. And I don't understand why newspapers across the political spectrum, The Times and The Guardian, continued to carry stories hounding him after he had resigned as a professor. What is the public interest in those stories, and what risk assessment did those outlets do of the risk of carrying those stories? A month ago, none of us had heard of Dr. Arday. None of us, at least outside of the world of academia. When Rachel Reeves was caught plagiarising her book, when Rachel Reeves was caught embellishing her CV. Not a terribly uncommon thing, as anybody who's ever looked on LinkedIn will know. Those stories passed very, very quickly and really without much media comment at all. And I have questions about why that is. Those are people who are of immense consequence. Rachel Reeves, Johnny Reynolds, who claimed falsely to be a solicitor when he, I think, was Secretary of State for Business. People of enormous national importance, not obscure people. What is the difference between those stories? I think the difference between those stories is that those people are powerful white people, and Dr. Arday was a working class black man who it was convenient to our media to pull down. I would like to say that there should be some reflection now on the part of the media on how they handled reporting, which I do not think it is an exaggeration to say, hounded a man known to be vulnerable to his death.
I think it's a massive exaggeration to say that the media hounded a man to his death. I think that is totally untrue. There are factual errors in what Julian Maugham said. Jonathan Reynolds claimed to be a solicitor long before he was Secretary of State for Business. That's incorrect. Also, Rachel Reeves talking about her CV, that went very quickly without much media scrutiny. I'm sorry, where were you, Julian, when there was acres of media coverage, days of scrutiny of Rachel Reeves and her CV, huge amounts of commentary, and the fact that to this day, even though she's not Chancellor, I have people contacting me on numerous occasions calling her Rachel from complaints, Rachel from accounts. That CV embellishment is the thing that has stuck to her far more than many of her Treasury policies. I just found, I mean, Julian Maugham, clearly a friend, he has an emotional investment in that, he's entitled to his opinion, but so is Myron Sentinel Nathan, who's with me now, and Claire Muldoon. Myron, what did you make of what Julian Maugham said there?
I think it's predictable. It's a kind of weaponisation of a tragedy. I think what we're starting to see is that, you know, this is all about race. It's a very simplistic understanding of the situation. Look, there was a hell of a lot of coverage around this story, probably too much. And there were people like Andrew Neil who kind of pointed out that, hold on a minute, there is a guy here who he doesn't seem right, and I think he needs help. So there were media commentators coming in. So I think we have to be aware that that within this kind of furore that can happen, there could be vulnerable characters. But having said that, I think a lot of the coverage wasn't really about Jason Arday. It was about the whole woke industry, and he was the kind of avatar of that, unfortunately. And so his face was plastered everywhere. But this was a kind of a rebuke against the DEI, against our most famous institutions which had failed us, against people who would have lost out on positions as a result of DEI. So this was the whole thing. And on top of that, some of the kind of things that he was saying were quite comical. And then you had people like James O'Brien saying, I look like a mug. So it was a lot of juicy elements to the story, which is why I think it ran and ran and ran. But I think people like Andrew Neil and other people did point this out earlier, that there's something weird about the outlandish claims that this person is making. Is he okay? And I think that we perhaps could have taken that a little bit more seriously at the time.
Claire?
No, I don't really agree with much of what you've said there, but because I think to scrutinise is not to bully. And I think it is the fact that this was an institution that is one of the best universities in the world. If it was an old poly turned uni, there would not have been the same media storm around it. It's because of where this happened, and it's because of the backstory of this young man.
Which he created.
Which he created, of his own volition, which was neither fact-checked nor even checked in any level by his employer. They were almost salivating, foaming at the mouth at this DEI recruit. And to just even put it down to DEI, I think, is so patronising to every other academic of colour, not only in this country, but in the world. And the way around this, in my view, is to scrap all DEI. And do you know what we should be focusing on? Those students from a poor background, because poverty transcends race, creed and colour. That's where we should be targeting. Now, back
Isn't that a form of DEI to do that?
That should be the only form of DEI.
Okay.
I don't care if anyone is male, female, if they're black or white, or if they, whatever religion they are. if they've come from a really bad, poor background and they've managed to pull themselves up through hard work. You only need to read people's descriptions of where they were in their secondary education to get them into Cambridge. They were working solidly.
And there are a lot of, and Claire, you're absolutely right. And there are a lot of people who made allegations against Jason Arday that he wasn't marking their work correctly.
Yes.
That if there was any discussion about whether that was done correctly, he would allege racism,
yep.
for example. I don't want that anywhere in education.
This could all, not only was the whole media storm, the eye of all this storm pointed at Jason Arday and the University of Cambridge. If the University of Cambridge and Jason Arday had not called the police on people like, where is it, Nathan Coffness, who did the initial Substack, this wouldn't have come in to the media frenzy at all.
Do the media have a role here, or did they act correctly in your view?
I think they acted correctly overall, and as was said, they were false claims. There was a person gaming the system, there was a system that wanted to be gamed, and I think we can't let this be weaponised to shut down the whole kind of attack on DEI as it were, because that led to the death of Henry Novak, you know, and then that two-tier policing. Then we talk about...
Well, it didn't lead to the death of Henry Novak.
Yeah, you see what I mean? It's part of the ecosystem that led to that situation.
Well, there's an inquiry into that, but yes.
Even the closing, even the cover-up of the rape gangs is a similar scenario. So if we don't go at these issues, I think there's going to be far greater consequences down the line.
I think it's not going at DEI. I think it's actually going to the crux of the matter and calling people out for what they are, because you know, there used to be things called stereotypes. We can't stereotype people anymore. But the reason stereotypes are there is because behaviour, sociologically, intended that a group or a subsection group of the world, of society, acted in that way.
Thank you to Mary in County Down says, I don't think Jolyon said anything that was factually incorrect. It was opinion. I agree with him. The media did hound him to the point where he took his own life. Well, he did make a factual error when it came to Jonathan Reynolds, but thank you for your message, Mary. I just wonder as well, with the media, if we just take a step back here, when it comes to how Jason Arday used the media himself, and he was a commentator, as you guys are. He's someone who appeared on lots of different programmes, and there's sort of a slight deal you do, isn't there?
Well,
when you say if they build you up, they can take you down as well. But should the media look at how they do these things in the future, do you think? Robert
Maxwell, Caroline Flack, other people have been in the media spotlight, right? Other people have been criminalised by the media, the court of public opinion, and has led to people taking their own lives, right? Also, on the back of that, there have been other people cancelled very, very badly in this country, fallen off their perch, not given anything, and they haven't taken their own life. There's a complete differential here.
Let's take a couple of voice notes on this before we move on to the next topic and a break. Gary has been in touch on Jason Arday.
Yeah, good morning. It's Gary from Watford. With regard to this tragedy of Arday, the professor, everyone seems to be missing the point. This guy was mentally unwell. I have to deal every day with a very close relative who has problems, and it's so difficult. This guy obviously has had that for many years, but people have been feeding into it, which has made him worse. So it is really absolutely no surprise that when it started to unravel, when you're dealing with someone who obviously cannot deal with that because of mental health issues, this I sadly think was inevitable. So it is a shame, but this has been brought on for, it could have been avoided, as we say. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Gary. Let's hear another voice note from Michael.
Morning, Peter. Mate, you're a bit wrong about people not committing offences who lie about their experience, who lie about their qualifications, who give fake references to secure a job. The Fraud Act 2006 makes it an offence that when people do that dishonestly, deliberately, or even recklessly to obtain for themselves or somebody else the opportunity to earn money in an office of employment, then they do commit an offence under the Fraud Act 2006. So whilst you might not want to mention his name, he did actually commit an offence. You said earlier he wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a convicted criminal, but he did actually commit a criminal offence. As do quite a few of the politicians, I think, who lie about their CVs. Anyway, it's a nice cool day in Staffordshire. Thanks for the show, fellas. Michael from North Staffordshire.
Michael, thanks for that message from North Staffordshire. Really appreciate it. I think I don't necessarily disagree with you per se. I think what I was saying earlier was that he wasn't subject to criminal investigation and certainly hadn't been convicted of anything. So the guest was saying that he was a criminal. I mean, that's a matter of opinion. Certainly he was not convicted in the court of law and there was no criminal investigation into what Jason Arday did. I'm not really disagreeing with you. It's just an additional point, I suppose, on that. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Carol from Clacton, who says, I am a Reform voter in Clacton. I absolutely agree that Nigel shouldn't have gone to the vote count. Why should he stand next to the absolute joke saddos that were there? I can't wait for a general election, says Carol. And Pauline says, I don't blame Nigel for not attending. The other parties in media are furious they couldn't humiliate him next to the bin, says Pauline VP. Are you the VP? I thought it was that JD Vance guy. Lots more from Claire and indeed from Myron in just a moment. Stay with us here on Talk.
The other main parties, Labour, the Tories, the Lib Dems, they didn't turn up. They bottled it like a bunch of cowardly chickens. And in so doing, they were greatly rude and discourteous to the Clacton constituents. And sure, not everyone's going to like a particular candidate, in this case, Nigel. And they were left with having to vote for a bin. And I just think it is a grave discourtesy. What it actually shows is that all the other parties, they threw themselves in the bin.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch. Let's talk about the alerts that happened last night. And we are, loads of people in England and Wales receiving these alerts. Let's have a look at the One Show and what happened last night.
We've got an incredible update on one of her very first One Show stories.
You couldn't make that up, could you? I think it's a fire alarm.
You've got some form of fire alarm going on.
It's fine, we'll continue.
But we continue.
And Christy's not the only former host returning to the show because Matt will be here too to.
Well, there we are. They rolled with a punch with what was happening there. So many people had a real difficulty with this. Loads of people in touch saying, why on earth are we receiving this alert to tell us about barbecues being sold? Did you receive it, Myra?
I did, yeah. I nearly spit out my coffee. It was hugely loud. But for me, it's typical Burnhamism is what I would describe it as. I can imagine the next alert being about how Greggs have run out of sausage rolls or something. It's something he's trivialised the whole concept of this alarm. This should be something that if we're almost at war or something really, really serious where everyone has to immediately drop what they're doing and take urgent action. And now I think everyone's going to become desensitised to these alarms because you know, we all know there's wildfires. We all know that, you know, that you shouldn't be putting out cigarettes in like dry forests or barbecues and so on. I think most people are watching the news cycle and aware of the heat, and we have been living long enough to know that we have to stay hydrated and all the rest of it. To get that kind of severity of alarm in that invasion on your phone, I think it's too acute, it's too severe, and it's too extreme, and it basically makes us look at the state and say, what are you doing? And it's the boy who cries wolf, and eventually when there is something serious, are we going to take it seriously enough? That's the question.
How did you react to it, Claire?
I didn't get it. I've disabled them.
OK.
I don't think, for all the reasons you've mentioned, there's no point. It's infantilisation at its worst. Anyone going into a supermarket at the moment or a petrol station purchasing one of those disposable barbecues needs their head looking at. They certainly don't need the government putting a ban on them. They certainly don't need the government telling anyone through these ludicrous noises. It's something quite apocalyptic, actually. And to have everybody... We're trying to get kids off their phones. We're trying to get society back to meeting up in pubs, talking to each other, establishing eye contact, you know, involving each other in political discourse, disagreeing agreeably. And then we get this nonsense through our phones. Everyone, just disable them.
Lots of reaction to that coming in. We'll take more calls, texts, tweets and voice notes about that as the programme goes on. The wildfires themselves, Claire, really worrying what has happened. These train derailments as well. The shock at a second train off the rails in less than 24 hours. This is a Greater Anglia train carrying around 45 passengers derailing near Wickford in Essex yesterday afternoon. No injuries reported, thankfully, with that one, but we know there with the one in Lewis previously there have been. Clearly worrying times, and there's a lot that's happening here. Many people out of their homes. These wildfires, earlier in the week, there have been fire services really struggling to cope.
Yeah, well, they are, but we're going to have to... The eco-zealots and the net zero madness has been going on for so many years. You would think that they would have pacts together, wouldn't you, on how to deal with all this going forward. They don't seem to have anything. All they seem to be doing is levying tax on people, telling us what we can't do instead of what we can do. Now, we need to look at countries like, and I keep going back to it, the Italian rail system is second to none. It is
They
fabulous.
also paint their train tracks white because of the sun.
So this is maybe things that we're going to have to adopt and do. But to see those buckled tracks was really quite incredible in my view, and we really ought not to have seen anything like that, nor had the train derailments that we have had. We just don't seem to be able to cope in anything. Now, back to the fires, we had the farmers up in the Cairngorms when they spread up there, and one of them was actually saying it's down to rewilding. And whilst that is important, there is clearly something in the ecosystem that would indicate that now maybe is not the time, because all it takes is a small flake, either from a fag butt or whatever. Then on the A31, one of the arterial routes between the west and east of the country, that was shut down because a van went on fire at the side of the road, and that then covered that area in fire. So there are human reasons why these fires are starting, not necessarily down to climate, and we need to be well aware of that in our dealings with it. A lot of this can be kept and dealt with, but we need the management, we need responsible management. We certainly don't need alerts going out to tell everybody it's a bit hot.
Myron, your thoughts?
I think we're coming out the kind of net zero era where people are starting to wake up to the fact that, you know, net zero isn't the way forward. And I don't want this to be kind of like, again, weaponised or for us to pivot into a discussion about how to double down on net zero. I think if you look at NASA's figures in terms of like land being burned, it's actually gone down across the planet. So I think we need to have adaptation. We need to get change the way we behave to a certain degree. I'm all for education, again, barbecues, cigarettes, and all the rest of it. But this can't be used to just pivot into a discussion about how we need to go back into net zero. That's what I'm concerned about.
OK, let's talk about immigration. Big issue of the week, and now legal challenges to what Andy Burnham wants to do when it comes to sending people to these middle-class areas. I mean, whether it's a poor area, middle-class area, or an area where homes are in the millions, there are very few people who will say they want migrants there. There are, of course, councils that say they want to be areas of sanctuary. Scotland is a country of sanctuary, apparently, but there are just so many of our viewers and listeners very angry about this. What do you think, Claire?
I'm not surprised, but I think this is Burnham politically addressing his backbenchers, and he has put that out to them to keep them on board in terms of this new deal that he's proposing to do. But what you'll find is he'll put them into places in the country that aren't Labour strongholds. So he will politically engage again to make them into reform.
Doesn't he have to win over those middle-class areas if he wants to win the next election?
This is one of the other reasons. And then you've got Edwina Currie, only the other evening, spouting nonsense about putting brothels up in Piddington. And she said it was a facetious comment. That's what she said in her defence post-interview, your sister channel at the Times.
Yes.
And I think that was really broadly the worst thing I've heard coming out of that woman's mouth. And there has been a lot, and I say that as a Conservative, not only with a small c, but going now to Badenoch's popularity with a big C.
I will come to Myron in a second, but actually I read this out last night. I just want to read it out again tonight because Lula is a sex worker and emailed me actually to say this, and I'd love to hear both your reaction to this on Edwina Currie's comments, which, you know, hugely reactive the other night as well. This is Edwina Currie, the former Conservative minister, who suggested, she says in the facetious comment, that there should be brothels in these areas because there are so many male asylum seekers there. Lula got in touch and said, I find Edwina Currie's remarks extremely offensive. As a sex worker, you're slightly more streetwise than the average person. So what she was saying is that there should be a brothel open for migrants. Has she thought of the danger that those sex workers would be placed in, seeing some of the most dangerous men in the world, not to mention some from sub-Saharan Africa will have HIV, hepatitis, TB. A lot of my friends are sex workers, and if that is what she thinks is a good idea, plus the going rate is between £400 to £600 an hour, what sex workers does she think would go and work seeing migrants? Well, the answer is about zero. They're not welcome in homes of multiple occupancy, hotels, army camps or brothels. They're never let into a brothel because of the dangers they pose. Sex workers are human beings, says Lula. Edwina's remarks are extremely foolish. If a migrant was listening to her on your show last night, she was basically giving them the green light to assault and to do God knows what to sex workers. You've got to remember that sex workers are someone's daughter, sister, wife, mother, even grandmother. We're not monsters, although that is how we seem to be portrayed in the media. Claire, what do you think?
Well, she's absolutely 100%. And whilst I abhor any form of sex working, I think it gives into lust, which is not a choice, and it's very much taking away from the act of sex. But I'm not so naive to know that there aren't sex workers around. Of course there are. It's the oldest game in the book, but still it's illegal. It's still illegal in this country. And for an ex-MP to turn down and say that, I thought it was very demeaning to women who clearly have, maybe they are coerced into that sex life because of a drug addict, a drug habit. Perhaps it's because of other forms of addiction, because maybe she's paying her pimp.
Myron, what do you think of this?
Well, I think Edwina Currie's comments are basically an admission that they are potential sex offenders being put into towns and villages across the country.
We know that.
Yeah, but that's what she's kind of saying, and she's basically admitting that women and girls are at risk by these individuals. So you can talk about brothels, and I totally agree with everything that sex worker put out there. And you can imagine, if you did put that in there, it would first of all another incentive for people to come over. On top of that, they treat people, a lot of these individuals treat women in their own countries in an abominable way. Imagine what they'll do when they get like a sex worker paid for by the taxpayer, right?
Well, there's no suggestion it would be paid for
by
the
you can imagine.
taxpayer.
Okay, I can understand it's a tongue-in-cheek comment, but nonetheless, it's worth extrapolating what the implications of what she's saying.
Are you defending what she said?
No. I'm simply saying that when she says you put a brothel there as a tongue-in-cheek comment, she is admitting that there are people being thrust into certain areas who are potential sexual predators. That's what she's doing by saying that.
Thank you both very much indeed. Really appreciate you joining me on the debate desk this morning. Myron Senthil Nathan has been with us, a Reform UK activist and campaigner. Claire Muldoon, the broadcaster and purveyor of fine pastries as well. There was one on the box that you brought in that said sweet and flaky, so good to see myself portrayed in a pastry. Lots to discuss in the next hour. Thank you to Claire, thank you to Myron. Aaron, and we'll speak to Steve Denyer about the showbiz. We'll talk about crime, immigration, a female detective sacked for gross misconduct and placed on the same barred list as a rapist for calling out the force's woke ideology. Mike Neville will be with us. We'll talk about the train chaos and the chaos as well in Heathrow because of some flooding there as well. We'll take over your calls, text, tweets and voice notes as well. If you want to contribute to the programme, you're very, very welcome to do so. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can get your voice on the air between now and 10. Loads to discuss both this morning and indeed tomorrow morning. I'm in for Mark Dolan tomorrow too. Lots more to discuss in the next hour, so please do stay with us on Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. This is Talk Breakfast. I'm in for Mark Dolan today and tomorrow between 6 and 10. It's been a lively show so far. Loads of people ringing and texting and tweeting, and it's great to hear from you because there's so many issues we're talking about this morning. The alerts, lots of people still angry about that alert, essentially saying don't buy a barbecue. We're talking about Jason Arday as well and allegations that he was hounded to death by the media. I think that's wrong. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. We'll talk to Mike Neville in just a second, the retired Scotland Yard DCI, about a female detective sacked for gross misconduct, placed on the same barred list as a rapist for calling out the force's woke ideology. Also, PC Harper's killers. That row continues. 1 million people, I'm one of them, have signed the petition to keep his killers in jail. Is that possible? Legally, logistically, what do you think about that? Loads to discuss. 0344 499 1000. You can text me at 722 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, or you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. As I say, on Twitter, it's at Peter Cardwell. On Instagram, it's at Cardwell Peter. And plenty to discuss on air between now and 10. So stay with us here on Talk Breakfast. Kate is in Shoreham and has given me a ring about the barbecue issue, the alerts issue. Kate, what would you like to say about this? You're very welcome to the programme this morning.
Okay, hello Peter. Yeah, we were having a lovely barbecue on the beach yesterday in Shoreham with my daughter, and you know, we're about hundreds of metres away from a house or vegetation, and the police, the fun police came over. Did you get your alert? You're not allowed to have a barbecue. I mean, it was a portable barbecue, one. And two, we're on a pebbly beach. I said, well, yeah, because these pebbles are really going to set on fire.
So sorry, just go back a bit, Kate. Tell me who told you couldn't have the barbecue?
Oh, just some person who lived in Shoreham. As soon as she'd heard the alert, she just couldn't rush out. She rushed to the beach to try and find someone having a barbecue.
And you had one of those portable barbecues. I mean,
no, it was a
disposable barbecue. I mean, they were banned from sale yesterday, but as you correctly say, on a pebble beach, it's highly unlikely things will catch fire.
It was actually a portable one, sorry. Not
a portable one rather than a disposable one. Sorry. Okay.
I just said to her, look, we're responsible. These pebbles are not going to set on fire, and I'm just sick of people sucking the fun out of life.
And how did that person react to that?
Well, she left.
Okay. Was she kind of panicked, or what was the kind of? Because I do wonder about this alert, or was it just a busybody?
I felt like she was quite gleeful that she'd actually found someone having a barbecue on the beach and rushed over, and just.
You think she was happy to tell somebody off?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we're on a beach which is like hundreds of metres of pebbles.
Yeah.
Everyone knows you can't set fire to pebbles.
I do worry about this, Kate, because I do think there's a lot of... I mean, you look at how... I suppose the point is best illustrated with the COVID lockdown restrictions. There are loads of people who loved that. There are loads of people being told what not to do, and, these are the restrictions, and you've got to do this, that and the other, and these are all the rules, and these are all the tiers. There were quite a number of people who really relished that, and they relished telling off other people for what they could and couldn't do. And I wonder, just with this alert, whether there's a little bit of that too with what happened last night, a sort of gleeful kind of, well, you shouldn't be doing that, when actually what you were doing wasn't ill-advisable. You thought about it. You sound to me like a responsible adult.
Yeah, they didn't even read the alert properly. It was more advice. It's not deemed illegal to have a barbecue.
Well, disposable barbecues were
or portable.
I know you didn't have a disposable barbecue, but disposable barbecues were banned from sale yesterday, so that's part of it. I mean, did it spoil your barbecue, or did you have a nice barbecue?
I think it did sort of trigger me a bit. I think, like you said, back to the COVID time where everybody's snitching on each other, and you couldn't see your family, and that's why I said to her, I'm just sick of the fun being sucked out of life. And I said to my daughter and her husband, I said, just imagine how much fun your kids are going to be left with. They're not going to be allowed to do anything soon.
Yeah, really interesting call there, Kate. Thank you, and I hope you have a nice weekend, and you can put a smile on your face again. Really interesting to hear that as well. Maybe get into that with Mike Neville in just a second too. Laura Jane is in Hampshire and has some thoughts on Nigel Farage not showing up for the election count. Laura Jane, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, I'd just like to warn you, Peter, that I'm out walking my dogs with my neighbour, so there's 7 dogs and 2 humans.
That's all right. That's okay. All animals are welcome here. We're the most pro-animal show on the network, Laura Jane.
I know you are. I was feeling very miffed this morning, hearing, all the criticism and Michael, his biographer, etc.
Yes.
It did get me a bit triggered, to use the lady before's word. I feel that the point is, he by the way, I did go to Clacton with some of my dogs and campaign for him. So
okay.
You know, I saw, and I did see him. He was cheerful. We landed up in the same pub where he was having lunch. He couldn't have been nicer. I'm sorry, he was not grumpy ever. I know he was grumpy over, and I would be grumpy if my daughters had been brought into the whole thing. Anyway, the other thing I was basically saying is that I'm glad he didn't go to the count. It was an absolute farce, and the media would have had a field day photographing him with all those people, and it would have been, you know, stuck on everybody's memory. And I just feel yet again the media have got it in for him. No matter what he does, if he, you know, he's wrong in every sense of the word. And quite frankly, he was better off at the Farage Fest. You know, thanking all the millions of, well, not millions, but a lot
many
of
people anyway. Yeah,
many volunteers from, and I just feel that it wasn't cowardly. This was not an IRA attack like Margaret Thatcher carrying on afterwards. This was just a whole load of establishment people, particularly the BBC guy Binface. I mean, he was being sponsored by Dale Vince for $185,000, and we're worried. You know, I'm sorry. It's just outrageous, and it's going to get worse before it gets better.
What's wrong with Dale Vince sponsoring a candidate he believes in? I mean, Nigel Farage took a £5 million donation.
Exactly. So they get at Nigel for that, and we're all supposed to ignore all the other.
I mean, it's not quite the same though, Laura Jane, is it? £185,000, if that is in fact the amount of money for a campaign, is.
But if I set you as a wonderful political sniffer dog, if I sent you out and I asked you to find out all the donations to all the parties, I bet you would find well over 5 million.
Well, they're all meant to be public anyway, but that debate is going to continue. Laura Jane, listen, thank you for your call. I really appreciate that. Certainly donations over a certain level anyway. Mike Neville's with me, the retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. Mike, good to see you in the studio. How are you doing? You all right?
I'm very well, actually, Peter.
Good, man. What about Clacton then? What do you think, in your view, with Farage particularly? He's won, but is it a victory per se? Because there are a lot of problems that are still facing him about these donations.
Yeah, I don't know what it's achieved, because it's gone back to how it was. You know, there's this inquiry and there might be another by-election. I do get the impression, though, that most Reform voters really aren't interested in this £5 million issue at all. I think it's been whipped up particularly by the Tories. You know, they've got to find some kind of attack. I don't think it... for him personally, I say it's gone back to where it was. So what's been achieved? And then, because he had that ridiculous election, I think what it did show us, though, is how the Tories, Labour and Liberal Democrats will all collaborate together. So what was being said about the Uni Party all came to fruition. It was shown that why didn't they stand there? You know, so you've got Kemi Badenoch on the TV saying Clacton deserves better than Nigel Farage. Well, where's your candidate then? That is this better option? So I don't think all it does is solidify people's views. You know, there are people who will always vote for Reform, and there are people who vote for the Uni Party, particularly something that's you know, the bin or whatever else that was there. So I think we just move forward.
Okay.
It made no difference whatsoever, I think.
One big story this week, and I've signed the petition, is about PC Andrew Harper's killers. They are in jail. One won't be released because was convicted of murder, but 2 others convicted of manslaughter are in a situation where they may well get early release. The Prime Minister has had mixed messages about this, to the extent, actually, that PC Harper's mother has said she found it very distressing, and of course she will, for lots of reasons, just simply having it in the media. But when you hear these contradictory things, now it seems to be, and this has gone on for days, now it seems to be that Alex Norris, who's the Justice Secretary, the ball's been sort of lobbed to him from Andy Burnham. What do you think is happening here?
I think it's a complete mess. I think you've got contradictory ideas. I think the left, they really don't believe in prison, and they're sort of happy to this has happened and let them out. But they're also ruthless politicians, and they know that this is such a public issue that to release these 2 characters in particular will damage their voting. So they're in a real quandary as to what they do. And you look at the Prime Minister, what he says. Everything he says about the overcrowding in prison is about how do we release more people. Not where's the plan. I'll go and help them. I can help them find some more prison places. Give me a month and I'll sort it out. But they don't want to hear that. So, and it's such a mess. And I think you've got to praise PC Harper's mother and wife, who campaign relentlessly about this. And the great irony is because of their efforts, they brought in a law, Harper's Law, where people who kill emergency service workers shouldn't be released. And then that doesn't apply to these two awful characters who you can see laughing and sniggering. But I just think it exposes Labour as saying, like many of the politicians, saying the right things and then doing nothing.
Tell us about this story about the female detective sacked for gross misconduct. What is going on here, Mike?
Yeah, well, this is Rachel Fletcher, who's in Northumbria Police. Now, if some viewers and listeners will remember Northumbria Police, the chief constable was taken to court and forced to stop officers attending Pride in uniform because it showed they were biased. So this is a sort of woke police force you're dealing with. And this officer has made all sorts of, like, stupid statements saying about, men's penises, which rhymes with frocks. Men's penises in frocks. She's called transgender people. Then she said all men are racist. All men are rapists. And that all men should have a 9 p.m. curfew. So these are particularly stupid things to say, I suppose, when you're in the police. But you know what? Whatever happened, Peter, to getting somebody in, I was a DCI, you get somebody in and say, what is this stupidness going on here?
Yeah. You have a word, don't you?
Don't say it again. You've annoyed this person. Oh, what? How has she annoyed you? She said that, he said, she said. Right, you two, you've got to get on for the good of the people. But what we end up with all the time in the police is these discipline hearings. Now, how much money and time is spent on discipline? The time spent investigating this nonsense, like primary school rubbish, could have been time you could have been investigating a burglary, a robbery, a rape, or whatever else. And these chief constables, and you see it with Sir Mark Rowley, the Commissioner of the Met, they seem to think the more people you boot out of the police for some stupid infraction, the more the public will trust them. Well, they don't. What will drive up public trust in the police is stop doing two-tier nonsense, so they don't have to be taken to high court to do something which is obviously biased. And secondly, catch a lot more criminals, and then the public will trust you again. They're not going to trust you for holding these sort of show trials for primary school childishness that's going on in the CID office.
I do wonder, I mean, there's got to be some sanction, doesn't there?
Yeah.
There needs to be a disciplinary process, but when this person is put on the same list as a rapist for calling out these sort of aspects, is that a good use of time?
No, it's not, because she's been put on this barred list, so anybody who gets booted out of the police for being dishonest, evil, wicked, whatever, they put on a barred list so they can never apply to the police again. And she's been put on the same list, and this, as I say, this is something whereas a sergeant, an inspector should be dealing with this and sorting it out. It's primary school nonsense. Like I say, if you're a man and this woman's investigating rapes, you do not want somebody investigating rapes who's saying all men are rapists, because you've got to look at everything through unbiased eyes. So she needs to be told this isn't what you should be saying, this is not what you should be believing. However, to take it to discipline board and all, senior officers, 3 senior officers sat there deciding, rather than 3 senior officers deciding where we should be deploying officers to target robbery and burglary, and all the money, it's just ridiculous. And Northumbria Police, they thought, I'm sure they all sat very pious when they booted her out, thinking, oh, the public will trust us. And do you know what? It's ridiculous. It's just shown them to be fools, to be honest.
Mike, thank you. That's Mike Neville there, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. What do you make of what he said there? Very interested to hear your opinions. 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 10 o'clock here on Talk Breakfast. Stay with us.
his own Farage Fest last night, which was held in a paddock about 12 miles from where I am here at the pier. And that's where he delivered his victory speech before the count came in. And some view that as deeply controversial.
He went to do a victory speech at the count. What you'd have had is 30 chumps there, all sort of screaming and shouting and heckling and, you know, making a big distraction on stage. And I think he's gone, that is not the image I want projected via national television, going out to the whole of Great Britain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Tony's been in touch with a voice note about the Clacton by-election. That's something a lot of people want to talk about. If you're one of them, do give me a voice note or indeed a ring on 0344 499 1000. Let's hear what Tony has to say.
Morning, Peter. I don't understand why people keep saying, what was the purpose of doing Clacton? It's quite simple, really. The people in Clacton spoke out and said, we don't care. We don't care about the 5 million. We're not interested in the 5 million. Whatever the results of the committee are now, we don't care. We just wanted our MP back. So why do people care? And it's no good going on and on and on and all these people saying he's done the wrong thing. No, he did it to prove to them that people want him in. Drop it. And I think he should just now ignore the media. Whenever they asked about the committee, just say, it's in hand, nothing I can do, same answer, end of, finish it.
Tony, thanks. Another one on Clacton from John.
Hello, Peter. I've been listening all morning. The thing that's coming through for your show this morning with regards to Nigel Farage is there is no balance. Nigel Farage was completely right. He did his speech in front of thousands of Reform voters, and I wished I was there with them, instead of being hassled and demeaned by all these people. And you'd love that, you and the media, so that's why he didn't do it. He is a very clever politician, and I bet you something comes out of all of this. You mark my words, because he knows what he's up to. John from the door, Doyle. Bye-bye.
John, thank you. Really appreciate your comments. Just a gentle and hopefully friendly reminder to people to please do switch off your radio or telly. Just turn it down while you're recording your message, just because we do have some people who have hearing difficulties, and if there's extra stuff going on in the background, it means they can't hear your great words like those we heard from John there. Tad's been in touch and says, what a tragic set of circumstances befalling the errant Professor Jason Arday. It was clear he had issues, but who on earth took him at his word and did not exercise due diligence? I can but conclude his appointment was politically motivated for their convenience. The situation is a whole lot worse. I feel very strongly about people becoming so depressed they contemplate taking their own lives. A permanent solution to a temporary problem is never the right way to go, and thank you to that from Tad as well. Interestingly, just on this as well, Tad has also said it would be all too easy to take issue with some of the points made thus far, but surely it must be incontrovertible that a person in his predicament should not pay with their life for what is essentially an inert mental illness. Totally agree. I mean, I don't think, you know, everyone's very sad that this has happened, including me. If there's a price to pay, then it's the responsibility of Cambridge University to pay it with the sacrifice of some of their careers. They're guilty of exploitation in aiding and abetting, says Tad. Interesting perspective there. We'll return to that issue, but I want to talk about the trains just at the moment and various transport issues. There's shock at a second train off the rails in less than 24 hours. This is a Greater Anglia train carrying around 45 passengers derailing near Wickford in Essex yesterday afternoon about 2 o'clock. Major disruption was sparked, but no injuries, thank goodness, on that one. In Lewis earlier in the week, there were injuries and a number of people, many people, inconvenienced by all of this. Steve Mulholland is the Chief Executive of the Construction Plant Hire Association. Steve, what do you make of all of this and the fact that it is happening?
Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, hi.
Good morning. It's a dual role. It also includes the Rail Plant Association, who are the guys that supply all the specialist machinery.
So you've in-depth knowledge of all this equipment. What do you think went wrong?
Our members have. What we have seen extreme temperatures. We know that, but what we are seeing in the rail industry in the last two control periods, which is in effect their 5-year budgetary periods, is managed asset decline. So what that in essence means is that they are stretching out the life of the asset. I travel the country 5 days a week pretty much by rail, Peter, and the train managers and the drivers are giving constant commentaries these days on what the problems are on the track, why they're reducing speeds. So there's a lot of good engineering knowledge has gone into making sure that there hasn't been a catastrophic accident yet. However, these are low-level alarms which are now sort of due to the perfect storm of these asset lives being stretched, the rail replacements not being what they could be due to budgetary constraint from the Treasury to the departments that take care of this. It really is a concern, and it's not hindsight. We've been going on about this in the 2 years that I've been running the Rail Plant Association, that we're probably only 2 or 3 accidents away from the public waking up and realising that this is a serious issue. This is what politicians should be focusing on, and Treasury should be doing its utmost to help out the parts of infrastructure, transport in particular, which are absolutely key to reindustrialisation that the government is talking about. And just to let the guys understand about the makeup of the railway track, you have the ballast, you have the timbers, and then you have the steel. And that steel, as we all know from the government bailout of Scunthorpe, that steel's UK steel. All those materials are domestic materials. It's absolutely top drawer quality. So if we can help kickstart, maybe this is a wake-up call, we're needing to kickstart more railway maintenance and enhancement, which is something we've been calling for a long time.
Steve, I wonder what we can learn from other countries with this. I know in Italy they paint the railways, the actual rail lines, they paint them white because of the heat. We've had 5 heat waves so far this summer. If we have another summer like this, there are going to be things that we're going to know from this summer that have to be dealt with and have to be learned and changed between now and next summer or whenever we have another heat wave.
Peter, if the government is serious about GB Rail making a difference, as well as the reindustrialisation side of it, we have the health and safety side of it to look at as well. We can look at other countries, we can look at our own governance of the railways. One of the things we've suggested, the Office of Road and Rail is responsible for safety and the economic side of the railways. That's something that in any other walk of construction or infrastructure, the Health and Safety Executive, the HSE, would be involved in any incident. Therefore, there's absolutely no conflict of interest, and so the root problems tend to be addressed very, very quickly.
OK, Steve, listen, thank you very much indeed. Dual role, Steve says as well, Chief Executive of the Construction Plant Hire Association and also the Rail Plant Association. Thanks to him for joining us this morning. On the alarm, Dan has been in touch with a voice note on this. You can send these in via WhatsApp, same way you send a voice note to anybody else, 0344 499 1000. This is what Dan says.
Morning, Peter. Danny from Bedfordshire here. I didn't get this alarm yesterday, but why are the government not releasing an alarm for the illegal invaders, letting people know where they are, what they're up to, and the areas to keep away from? Because they're becoming much more widespread, much more dangerous. That's the real threat to England and Great Britain, not some donut with a barbecue not allowed to use his hosepipe. That's all. Have a great day. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Dan. Let's hear from Michael.
Yeah.
Oh, do we have Michael
Morning,
there?
Peter.
There
Great show. Great to have you back in on a weekend. Yeah, the alarms, as was said by one of your contributors, you just turn them off. If you do a Google search or an AI search, it'll show you how to do it. It's not difficult, but they're pointless. They are completely pointless and performative. OK, cheers. It's Michael from High Wycombe.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for your kind comments. Ed?
Morning, Peter. Ed from Birmingham. On the alert, do they ever think about what happens to victims of things like domestic violence? Some people have phones where they use to contact people when things are happening, and maybe the secret phones and stuff. So send this alert for stupid reasons could, cause more problem than it solves for some people. But, keep up the good work, mate.
Thank you for that comment, Ed. Appreciate all those voice notes. Let's go to the calls now. Chris is in Felixstowe and has some thoughts on Jason Arday's death, the Cambridge professor. Chris, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, morning, Peter. I'd just like to say that the sad situation with Jason is a result of our race to the bottom, accepting mediocrity, and we should be choosing on merit, not on social or racial qualification. This is why the country is sinking into this situation. And this started back in the 1960s with schools becoming politicised by the left. And this has continued until now.
So when it comes to Jason Arday, when you hear this tragic news yesterday, I'm always really careful, or I try to be anyway, when we talk about people taking their own life, because we don't want to talk about blame or anything like that. But when you think about the idea more generally, this controversy is, he obviously made things up. There are some people arguing, as Julian Mom did earlier on, as we heard that clip from him, that the media hounded him to his death. What do you make of that point, Chris?
Well, I still think that a lot of this issue is brought on by things, admittedly with Jason Arday, it was to do with his mental health, but, not choosing on merit is a problem that this country has suffered from.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate your points. Let's go to Elliot in Hertfordshire. This is what Elliot has to say. Hi, Elliot.
Peter. Hi, we've spoken before. Great show. Look, there's something terrible that's being missing here. First of all, clearly, the death of this individual is awful. It's tragic for him and obviously his family and the people you leave behind. But this is what's missing. I've just read all these platitudinous contributions by the universities, Peter, saying how they're so upset and they're so this and they're so that. The fact is, they took his story. They never did the investigations, or maybe they did and they ignored it. We don't know. The point I'm making is the fact that if they really had investigated and had been honest with themselves and based the whole activity on merit, as your previous caller said, they might have just said to this Jason individual, look, it's not quite right what you've done, or you're saying you've done this, but you haven't. And they may have kicked some sense into him and he could have been stopped. I don't know. The point I'm making, Peter, is when I read these sickening sort of, they're so sorry, in my view, their activity has promoted this tragedy and they are partially responsible for the death of this individual. It's a terrible thing, but it's a fact. He made these things up. Clearly, no one investigated it. I'm terribly sorry that he's taken his own life. We don't know. But the fact is, the universities just took it to tick the relevant political correct boxes. They are partially, if not totally, responsible.
They're not totally. There's no way they're totally responsible, Elliot. But I get the point about being partially responsible. My point, and I made this earlier in the programme, is they wanted to believe his lies. They wanted those lies to be true, and they didn't want to check those lies. That's what journalists did. And, many people not happy about that and the way they conducted themselves. But I totally agree with you. Cambridge University and other universities as well, not just them, have a lot to answer for here, Elliot.
You are right. They did take his lives, and this is where the whole environment in this once great country of ours is being ruined by political correctness. They needed to tick the boxes, if I'm allowed to say, because he was a man of colour, if I'm allowed to say that. He was black. He supposedly had this terrible upbringing.
I mean, they were the ones. It's not a matter of you being able to say that or allowed to say that or not allowed to say that, Elliot. They talked again and again and again and again about how he was the youngest black professor, how few black professors they had, how it was such a good thing to have a black professor. And I mean, they trumpeted that. They talked about that to a huge degree. That was to an extent his brand. He perpetuated many lies. It's a terrible thing he's dead. It's a terrible thing that he went through all that he went through. But those lies were going to be exposed, weren't they?
That's right. You're absolutely right. And the fact I'm simply saying, I will just recapture my point and simply say partially responsible. But when I read, please have a look, I'm sure you have, at all these supposed sort of, oh, it's so terrible and it's
we read out some of them earlier.
And given what they did do in order to, again, I emphasize, tick the politically correct boxes. Look what we've done. Look what we've got here. Isn't it wonderful what we're doing for society? They are absolutely repugnant, and I think it's a disgrace on our one straight educational system. Cambridge was meant to be, when I grew up in the 60s and 70s, was the jewel in the crown of universities.
And it should be. It should be that, Elliot, and it isn't. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Just you had a final point there, Elliot.
No, I just think it's a disgrace, and it shows the wider environment, the rotten society that we have become, and that we have allowed ourselves to become. And you know what, Peter? 99% of the population believe it's rotten, but everyone is frightened to say anything because the 1% that are pushing this nonsense down our throats for the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you know, the empty vessels make the loudest noise. They are inadequate, they despise our culture, they despise our history and heritage. Well, I don't, nor do you, and nor do your viewers and listeners, and nor do 99% of the population. And it's about time we got up and said so. And I think the people at the Cambridge should be thrown out of their jobs. I don't care. It should be on merit, not all this rubbish political correctness.
Thank you very much indeed, Elliot. Strong points there. What do you make of what he said? 0344 499 1000. For mental health support and information, you can call Mind Info Line on 0300 123 3393, or the Samaritans are available 24 hours a day on 116 123. More calls after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We'll do Guess the Year with Steve Denyer a little bit later on, coming up to 10 o'clock when Alex Phillips will be taking over. She'll be here 10 till 1. I'll be back tomorrow between 6 and 10, filling in for Mark Dolan again. Alex again, 10 till 1, and then the usual schedule this week, I think, although someone's off. Who's off? Ian Collins is off, and David Bill will be filling in for him. I'll be here between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. 5 nights next week, as usual. John has been in touch. He's a Reform voter from Saxmundham in Suffolk. He says people just do not get it. Farage would have been continually attacked and smeared by the media and his opponents all summer, but instead he got on the front foot to stop it, an absolute masterstroke. The establishment will now look ridiculous if they push for another by-election. Meanwhile, Reform go top again on the latest polling. Teresa says, great to have you back on a weekend. Thank you, Teresa. I think that everything that is going on in this country at the moment should we should stop sending aid to other countries. We are now in drought ourselves. I know they're going to help the farmers, but it's not enough money. We send billions to countries that have a space programme. I think enough is enough. We need to be looking after our own country now. Paul in Burnley says, Mike Neville, great what he says, but I wonder, would he be allowed to speak like this if he was still in the police force, or would he be sitting in front of a disciplinary panel? I think a lot of things that Mike Neville and probably Peter Blackley say too would not be welcomed in the police, and that's part of the reason we have them on. Another person says, go to the settings on your phone, turn off the alerts for extreme and severe alerts. Davy Rees in West Kirby in the Wirral says, being an ex-railway signalman for over 15 years, the answer to this is expansion joints fitted to the tracks. This will stop the derailment, says Davy. Ernie says, why should Farage stand on a stage full of clowns who should never have been allowed to stand in the beginning? It was like a scene from a holiday camp stage. Politics is a serious matter which affects everyone's lives. This country is fast becoming the laughingstock of the world. Kim in Beaconsfield says, I totally agree with Elliot, who was the caller who was on a minute ago. The sooner we stop this DEI nonsense, the better. That's Kim in Beaconsfield there. Let's go to Andrea in Manchester, who wants to talk about the wildfires and the alerts. You're very welcome to the programme. Andrea, what would you like to say?
Morning, Peter. It's
Morning.
Andrea, Olivia Cat's mum. We're just listening. We always listen to you.
Thank you.
You're our favourite presenter. So I was actually, just a couple of points on the wildfires. So I was actually walking in some woodland with my son yesterday evening, and you can imagine my phone went off, and it honestly, it made me jump. You know, I
think a lot of people had that experience, Andrew. They're wondering I certainly wondered what on earth's going on here.
Imagine if you were driving, though, or you were doing some kind of intricate task.
Yeah,
Do you know what
exactly.
I mean? It was really scary. And then, to be honest, I thought, Russia going to nuke us, Iran going to nuke us.
Yeah.
Then I looked on the phone, and it was, honestly...
But the thing is, Andrea, it's meant to be for that stuff. It's meant to be for serious, major emergencies, not just, oh, yeah, you know, don't have a disposable barbecue.
Exactly. And I'm not minimising the dangerous wildfires. We've had a lot up north here.
Of course not. Of course not.
But how patronising is it, Peter? Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, yeah, we were really gobsmacked. The other thing is, I mean, you know, my son he got an alert on his phone literally a minute after I did. But honestly, reading that text, I just thought, you know, people know not to light fires. You know, well, most intelligent people do. It's kind of nanny state, and it really concerns me. I just think, you know, how far are things going to go? I mean, banning disposable barbecues. Come on, the lady who was on the beach earlier on the Pebble Beach, you know, it's kind of nanny state. It's too much. You know, it's a denial of agency for kind of people without a brain. Do you know what I mean? It's really, really scary. The other thing I wanted to say about the alert as well is, so my mum has Alzheimer's.
I'm sorry to hear that, Andrew. It must be difficult to deal with.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, she was only recently diagnosed at the end of January, so you can imagine as a family how it's just horrendous, Peter. You know,
there's so much to deal with in that situation as well. There's emotional, financial stuff. There's everything.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, working full time and then sort of caring for my mum as well. I mean, luckily I've got a wonderful brother and sister-in-law, so the three of us kind of, we do it between us. But anyway. Yeah. Her phone went off last night. Mum didn't have a clue, you know. It was really quite scary. So
yeah, of course.
You know, I get it. Sometimes it's inevitable that you kind of have to do these things, but come on, disposable barbecues, really?
Listen, all the points you make are perfectly good ones. Andrea, thanks for your warm words, and I wish you well with your mother, and really good points there as well. Let's hear some more from Adam, who's in Cannock. Adam, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say? Hi, Adam, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a little warning about turning your severe warnings off on the iPhone. Something I didn't know. The other night, I don't think a lot of people know it. The other night, I was working. I work weird hours, and I was working, and there were the fires up in Stourbridge, and I had to come up the M5, and they closed the M6 junction 6 to 5. So I thought they might close the M5 at Stourbridge. So that was on my mind, and I left my phone on the roof of my van, and I was driving up at about 11 o'clock, and just oblivious. And I got home, and my wife was in bits. She'd received a text. The police had received a text and sent a car round that had had a crash from my phone.
Right.
Because my phone had fallen off my van into the side.
Right.
And it warned that I'd had a crash. But my wife phoned the police, and they followed me on ANPR and assured her that I was okay.
Wow. Okay.
So
you won't be turning that alert off then?
That's it. But the other good thing was, because we had the location, we went out in the car, and 1 o'clock in the morning, ringing the phone, what 3 words did, and we actually found the phone, so it saved me 700 quid.
Okay, goodness me. Well, listen, that's a cautionary tale, and thank you for it. I appreciate that. That's Adam in Cannock there. Let's get another call from Phil in Hertfordshire on Jason Arday. Phil, you're very welcome. What would you like to say?
Good morning, Peter. Yeah, firstly, it's very, very sad that obviously Jason Arday took his own life. It's tragic. However, there's a lot of speculation as who's to blame. There's a lot of finger pointing. I think the issue here is Cambridge University seriously need to look at their vetting process. I think they got drunk on DEI. They couldn't believe, they thought that it was like heaven coming in. He's ticking all the boxes, let's go for it. They didn't do any proper checks. Now, if they had have done that, they would have sort of ruled him out immediately, and this would not have escalated into the situation that's occurred. So I think Cambridge have got a lot to answer for. So instead of pointing the finger and blaming everybody else, look at themselves, all of them.
Okay. Yeah.
That's how I feel about that.
Phil, really good points there. Thank you for them. That's Phil in Hertfordshire. You can give me a call on 0344 499 1000, or indeed, if you don't get through to me, you can ring Alex because she's on between 10 and 1, and I'm sure the Arday case, Jason Arday's death, will be talked about in that programme. We'll speak to Alex a little bit later on about what's coming up on our show. But in the meantime, it's been quite a heavy morning. There's some very, very big and important news stories around, and it's right that we discuss them. But we're also going to have a retro rewind because Steve Denyer is here to put a smile on our face and to remind us about some of the events of yesteryear on a date, indeed on a year that you can guess. Indeed, you can text us or tweet us or let us know your thoughts on which year it is. We will find out before the end of the show. We'll speak to Steve about the momentous events that happened there, including the wreck of the Titanic being discovered. Stay with us.
His own Farage fest last night, which was held in a paddock about 12 miles from where I am here at the pier, and that's where he delivered his victory speech before the count came in, and some view that as deeply controversial.
If you went to do a victory speech at the count, what you'd have had is 30 chumps there, all sort of screaming and shouting and heckling and, you know, making a big distraction on stage. And I think he's gone, that is not the image I want projected via national television, going out to the whole of Great Britain.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's take a look back. Steve Denyer is a Virgin Radio presenter and is here in the studio. Hello, sir. How are you?
Great to see you again.
Great to see you too. Forgotten what you look like. I know that there is Virgin, which you work for as well, but there's some spin-off stations as well. There are 4 of them. But yeah. I hear this to be a 5th, which is just devoted entirely to you. It's all about Steve Denyer.
I love it.
And you know what it's going to be called? It's going to be called Virgin Radio Legend.
There you go. I thought you were going to say all Denyer all day.
All Denyer all the time. So tell us what's going on with the session, because Chris Evans is back.
Chris Evans is back this week.
Yeah.
We thought we're in this kind of weird like holiday period, so we thought the next couple of weeks before the new season of TFI Friday Unplugged, we're doing this thing called TFI Unseen, which is lots of the bits, some retro stuff that was never actually shown back in the 90s, some stuff this week. Alan Brazil, our fine colleague from TalkSport, joined Chris yesterday. And Bella Ramsey's in this new film called Sunny Dancer out this week. But there's old stuff with Fern Cotton and Ben Miller and some great music guests as well. So it's all on our YouTube channel. It's Virgin Radio UK. If you hit subscribe there, you'll never miss a future episode. But it's all the TFI stuff brought back. You've seen the studio, obviously,
of course,
the
it's
corridor.
fantastic, yeah.
And it's so much fun. It's great to see the show back in like a 2026 intimate podcast capacity.
So updated for the I remember watching it growing up. I mean, it was just
it was iconic, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, much like yourself. Let's talk about the year, which we will not be saying. What's happening? Live Aid happened on the 13th of July.
Yeah, should we take a look? This is how it started, one of the biggest music events in history. Look at this.
And we're on fire here at
It's 12 noon in London, 7 a.m. in Philadelphia. And around the world, it's time for Live Aid. Wembley welcomes their Royal Highnesses, the Prince and Princess of Wales.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Royal Salute.
I mean, Live Aid was something really special, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't think we realised when we were watching. I remember watching it with my parents. I was a kid. But it was special, but it's gone down in history. I think Alison Moyet said that she turned up thinking it was going to be a charity event, and it wasn't until she saw the crowd and she was in a helicopter with David Bowie, she thought, I should have made a better effort with my with my outfit. Because years later, we're still looking back on it. I think one of the most iconic sets was Queen, Freddie Mercury. It was 22 minutes long, and they went on and they'd been rehearsing and rehearsing and rehearsing with the space, and they knew how big the stadium was.
I'm probably going to get this wrong, but is it correct that Phil Collins appeared in Philadelphia and then flew to London and performed in London as well?
Yeah. He managed to make both of those occasions.
There is that brilliant... I mean, Against All Odds is one of my favourite songs. I think it probably is my favourite song, actually. And there was a bum note in it. I don't know if you remember that. He kind of got it wrong. He pressed the wrong key.
Right.
And it still sounded amazing. It was sort of even better because it was Phil Collins at Live Aid.
Yeah.
Some sad things happened this year as well, and please do guess which year it is. You can text me, you can drop me a WhatsApp 0344 499 1000 or text me on 87222 and send those dates through that you think it is. Guess the year. The Bradford City Stadium fire.
Yeah, I mean, this sends chills. I mean, this event was so tragic, but it changed everything as far as stadium safety. I've got a little clip of how this awful event played out on the radio. Take a little look at this.
And we're on fire here at Valley Parade. The whole end of the stand at one side is actually in flames now. I can see the orange of the flames. The game is actually stopped here at Valley Parade. Before that, there was a certain amount of shaking of fists and a bit of a hoo-ha at that far end. And they're running out of the ground now from that far end at this moment. And I'm hoping that the police, I can see some policemen's helmets over there, can control this. It looks like there could be a situation of panic, but all the time people are spilling onto the pitch, and we can see the flames going up into the air there. We're getting reports outside that steam is going over, and people are running around. They're running around beside us. They're running around all around us, and people are saying, get onto that pitch.
Absolutely dreadful event. 56 people died. More than 200 were injured in this year, Steve.
Yes, and it's so tragic. This was going to be one of the final sporting events at this stadium. They were due to tear it down literally the week after this fire happened to create a brand new stadium.
Your mic's fallen off, by the way.
Thank you. So what happened, what turned out was that this happened on the Saturday afternoon. And it was a cigarette, apparently, discarded with rubbish beneath the stadium that set on fire. But so much devastation. I think it was kind of this and the King's Cross fire that changed public safety and perceptions as to smoking. And, you know, these new stadiums were created with better seating. But it will go down in history as one of the biggest sporting disasters in this country. And it happened on the 11th of May. And, of course, it was live on television. Lots of people saw this, the flames just spread, and you know, our thoughts to anybody who was affected back then and the memories of those people. We've also got a massive thing as far as I put my microphone on in a second, no one's noticing, one of the biggest soap operas of all time.
Yes, and actually, well, it's interesting. You, Spencer Oliver, who works down the corridor from us at Talk Sport, he's the boxing expert. You know when you make a joke and it doesn't land?
I've been there before.
Yes. I did that when I was chatting to him about he coaches people for boxing and so on, and he'd actually done a big... he'd done white-collar boxing and sort of training celebrities to become boxers. And I said, you know, who are the good ones, who are the bad ones? I said, I'm not going to tell you who the bad ones are, but let's just say a lot of people sign up for it and, you know, don't follow through with the training. But there was one actor from this particular television programme who was really, really good at it and turned off all the training, brilliant boxer, you know, did everything, put the effort in. And I said, Spencer, what was his style? Was it a sort of... It is, of course, EastEnders.
It is, of course. I love you. I've missed you. Here's a clip from the first episode.
That was EastEnders, the first episode of EastEnders. Thank you to Paul in Burnley, who's correct with the year, as is Kaz in Staffordshire, as is Keith in Blackpool, Margaret, Lucy, Brian, Ian, Dave, loads of people who are correct in all of that. And thank you also to Dave in West Wales, who says that gets it right. I recall the date as it was my 18th birthday. Pretty sure Phil Collins flew from the UK to US. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And Gary says, engage your brain, Peter. Think of the time difference. Phil Collins appeared in London, then flew to the US to appear in Live Aid, not the other way around. So thank you for that. I haven't had a huge amount of sleep, it must be said. So apologies for that. The wreck of the Titanic discovered as well this year.
The very first time. There's some great footage. There's a National Geographic special on that as they went down and saw it. It's mad to think that the world saw that for the very, very first time. They used some of that in the Titanic movie. Do you remember?
Yes.
They recreated at the beginning, and you actually saw some footage of that. So much happened in this year. Another massive thing that changed the world forever, but we didn't know on the 1st of January this year, was the very first mobile phone call was made.
Wow, okay, yes.
Within an hour of this year, and I've got some footage. It doesn't look like an iPhone. Take a little look at this.
Remember when this was the only way of making a phone call if you were out and about? Well, all of that changed just after midnight on New Year's Day, 19... Michael Harrison sneaked out of his family's party in Surrey and made his way to London's Parliament Square. There, he made the UK's first mobile phone call to his father, Sir Ernest Harrison, chairman of a new firm called Vodafone.
I mean, that's brilliant.
Isn't it great?
To see that, the huge level of equipment that was needed to do that. It was really pioneering technology, and not that long ago, and if you do know the year, do text in 87222 with the word talk in your text. That was mobile phones very, very successful, but some of technological innovations this year not as successful. The Sinclair C5, for example?
Yes, I mean, everyone remembers this. This is the little white... I remember seeing these on the streets. Very occasionally you would see one, and it looked like a novelty kind of... Well, what was it? Like a little... It looked like a kind of souped-up scooter thing, didn't it?
Yeah.
Didn't really go fast. I remember seeing one on an A road. A wheelbarrow. But they're in museums now, these things, and it didn't really catch on, but it was this white bespoke Sinclair C5 that he used to see knocking around. Movie-wise, Back to the Future.
Yes,
now,
of
Back
course.
to the Future is one of my favourite movies of all time.
It's a great film.
There's some great statistics about Back to the Future because it got turned down about 50 times from studios. They just didn't like the thing of going back in time and the logistics with the parents and all of that kind of stuff. Originally, the fridge was going to be a time-travelling fridge.
Right.
But they said, no, let's make it a car.
There's got to be a car.
We could put Michael J. Fox in.
Presumably in the pitch meetings for the film, they could have said, you don't need money, don't need fame, don't need no credit card to ride this train.
Good. And the song was...
by Hugh Lewis and the News.
There we are, The Power of Love.
The Power of Love. There was also Back in Time, was a great one as well.
Yeah.
And Hugh Lewis was in the film as well.
He was.
When they played the music and said, sorry kids, you're just too damn loud.
They put him on. It's just so good. It's so clever. Michael J. Fox wasn't even the original. They had another actor.
Right.
Until about 2 months in.
Okay.
And they were like, it's just not working. We need someone a bit younger, a bit cooler. Michael J. Fox has already auditioned. It's just so funny, isn't it, to think that the right things happened at the right time.
Yes.
They made the right movie, and we look back on that as such an iconic.
Well, there are all these things
in
Friends, for example. The actress who played Phoebe, I think, auditioned for the role of Rachel. There are all sorts of different roles. I think Matthew Perry read for the Joey character, and so there are all these sort of accidents of history, which mean major things. Speaking of history, I think the time has come, perhaps, to reveal which year it is.
Well, there's so many people getting this right, and I'm so glad because it's a really iconic year. You don't realise how much went on. It was 1985.
Wonderful.
1985, right in the middle of the decade. You have Ronald Reagan as obviously the president.
Yeah.
Margaret Thatcher was our prime minister. That was pretty much the 80s, wasn't it? So
that's right. 1985. Another person just got it right. Just came in there before Steve revealed that there. Steve Danier, thank you very much. That's Steve Danier, the Virgin Radio presenter. Lots of people getting in touch. Let me just read one more message on the fires, you're getting calls from intelligent and sensible people to state we don't need warning messages. My neighbour lit a bonfire about 7 o'clock last night with toxic materials on it, including plastic tiles and old settee. Smoke was blowing into my house. The bonfire was about 6 feet from his house and close to my fence. The fire service eventually turned up and extinguished the flames and doused the surrounding overgrown garden. The neighbour argued with the fire service, had taken no notice of the phone warning and didn't agree with what he had done wrong. What a waste of money because someone has no brain. Well, thank you for that. Clearly an annoyed neighbour there, and that does